Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Laura Connley. On March 15, 1978, in the United States, a girl named Laura was born. She was the third child of Carlen and James. Laura is very close to her sisters, and her parents always love and care for their children with all their heart. However, everything changed when Carlen and James divorced. At that time, Laura was still a teenager, and her parents' divorce affected her very much. During her difficult times, she turned to alcohol and then became addicted to psychotropic substances. Her mother, Carlen, believed these issues stemmed from the divorce and blamed herself for her struggles. Carlen was born on June 13, 1945, in Virginia. Her three daughters are always her number one priority, and she feels responsible for everything that happens to them. She feels guilty because her divorce has affected Laura, her youngest daughter. This guilt causes she to seek to justify Laura's actions. As a mother, she was always supportive and tried to help Laura through her challenges. However, other family members and acquaintances often found Laura irritable and always wanting attention. Even though 20 years have passed since Laura's parents divorced, when her two older sisters were married and living on their own, she continued to live in the family home. She was unemployed and continued to demand attention from her mother, Carlen. At one point, Laura has a boyfriend, and he moves in with her and her mother, Carlen. Laura believed she was mentally ill and repeatedly sought medical help to be prescribed psychotropic medication. Eventually, medical professionals stopped prescribing these medications to her. Because of craving for psychotropic drugs, she begins sneaking into neighbors' houses to steal any pills she can find. She also took advantage of her mother's kindness, repeatedly calling her mother at work and bothering her for various reasons. This eventually forced her mother to quit her job. In 2008, Laura was convicted of a minor shoplifting offense, but was quickly released after her mother, Carlen, posted bail for her. Unfortunately, the situation only worsened. At first she just scolded her mother, but gradually she started abusing her mother. Despite being hurt, but Carlen did not want to report her daughter to the authorities or have her thrown out of the house. On one occasion, after a violent incident, specialists were called to assess Laura's mental health. Even then, Carlen allowed Laura to return home, believing it was her duty as a mother to care for her. Laura's anger is not only directed at her mother but also at her boyfriend, Chris Lewin. She was taken to court twice for attacking him. One incident occurred in late October 2014, when she woke him from his sleep and accused him of cheating. Their argument quickly turned into violence. During the scuffle, she bit him and used a kitchen knife, causing a minor wound to his arm. This incident resulted in Laura being charged with a misdemeanor and she having to attend anger management therapy. Even though she was over 35 years old at that time, her behavior remained unchanged. A few months later, on January 7, 2015, Laura was arrested again. This time, she bit Chris's finger when he tried to stop her from attacking Carlen. He cannot understand why she resents her mother, Carlen, so much. Carlen always wholeheartedly took care of her three daughters and 5 grandchildren, whom she cherished deeply. Carlen tried her best to take care of Laura, providing everything she thought could help Laura overcome her problems. Sadly, despite Carlen's unconditional love and good intentions, Laura's cruel actions towards her were not stopped. On March 14, 2015, Laura called 911 to report an incident at her mother Carlen's home. She told the operator that there had been a home invasion and that her mother had been fatally shot. Officers from the Independence, Taylor Mill, and Covington police departments quickly arrived at the scene and were met with a gruesome sight. Laura was covered in blood. And Carlen, a 69-year-old woman, was lying on the kitchen counter, barely alive and suffering from multiple stab wounds. When police questioned Laura about what had happened, she claimed she couldn't remember, saying she had lost consciousness. However, she mentioned that, 2 hours earlier, a group of people knocked on the door asking for candy, a common occurrence during Halloween, despite Halloween being months away. She gave police various descriptions of the suspects, prompting authorities to launch a search. Police set up a cordon in the area, but no one matching Laura's descriptions was found. To further investigate, the police brought Laura to the station for questioning. During the interrogation, she shared additional details about the assailants, but also introduced inconsistencies. For example, she believes she was targeted because she has not paid the drug dealers. She later gave contradictory accounts of how she discovered Carlen's body. She initially said that when she got home, she found Carlen dead. She later said she slept in the basement, and after waking up and going upstairs, she saw Carlen's body lying on the kitchen floor. Hours after the investigation began, detectives Mike Richmond and Jim Moore from the Independence Police Department quickly identified Laura as being involved in the case. It became clear that she had lied to the police about what happened. Evidence showed that there was no break-in, and no fingerprints were found on the doors or windows. This led investigators to conclude that Laura was the only person in the house when her mother, Carlen, was murdered. Early on the morning of Sunday, March 15th, Laura's 37th birthday, authorities arrested her for the murder of Carlen. The following day, Monday, March 16th, Laura appeared in court via video link. She asserted that she was not guilty. However, she was detained without bail and sent to county jail, facing charges of murder and domestic violence. The court also prohibited her from having any contact with her boyfriend, Chris. Prosecutor Rob Sanders said Carlen's murder had come as a huge shock to local residents, as their area was known for its safety and low crime rates. He stressed that the case was still under investigation and admitted that it was still unclear what had happened. He also said that the reason why Laura committed such a serious crime would soon be clarified. The forensic report revealed the brutal nature of the attack. An autopsy showed that Carlen had been stabbed 77 times. She also had 27 defensive wounds and 2 bite marks. On March 24th, Laura appeared before a judge. She explained that she had no money, making her unable to afford a lawyer. In response, the judge assigned her a public defender and proceeded with the hearing. During the court proceedings, Detective Michael Richmond testified that there was no evidence of forced entry. He stated that Laura herself had opened the door to let the police in, and at the time of the incident, only she and Carlen were at home. Detectives reported that inside the home, they found Carlen on the kitchen floor, surrounded by several knives. He also reported that when they saw Laura, she was covered in blood, which was found on her shirt, arms, legs, face, and even on her lips and nose. After reviewing police testimony, the judge sent the case to the jury. On April 16, 2015, Laura Connley was formally charged with the murder of her mother, Carlen Connley. During the trial, the jury heard testimony from approximately 50 witnesses. The prosecution bolstered its case with testimony from police officers involved in the investigation and members of Carlen's family. The defense argued that Laura acted in self-defense. According to her lawyer, the stabbing incident happened due to stress when she was attacked by Carlen. When Laura testified, she told the jury that she and Carlen had been arguing about how she usually celebrated her birthday. During the argument, Carlen picked up a heavy object and struck her on the head. Laura claimed she could not remember anything that happened after being hit, including the 911 call she made. The jury was told that after the crime, when Laura was given a medical examination, experts confirmed that she had cuts on her head and back, along with bruises on her body and a hematoma under her eye. On March 23, 2017, the defense and prosecutors presented their closing arguments. Assistant District Attorney Lawrence presented the evidence to the jury and emphasized the inconsistencies and unverified claims in Lara's defense. That same day, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Laura Connley guilty of first-degree murder and recommended a sentence of 27 years in prison. Before the sentencing, Carlen's relatives submitted statements about Lara's influence on Carlen. Virginia, a daughter of Carlen and is Lara's biological sister, described her younger sister as extremely evil and sick. One of Virginia's daughters also criticized Laura harshly. Judge Leake sentenced Laura to 27 years in prison, as recommended by the jury. Another of Carlen's daughters commented that Laura was strange and denied accusations that their mother was cruel. She insisted their mother was not responsible for the conflict, denied allegations that their mother had ever harmed Laura. Lara's defense later filed a motion for a new trial. Lawyers argued that the sentence was invalid because Laura was not given the funds to hire a psychologist who could assess and confirm her mental health conditions, which included issues such as bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. The defense also claimed that, leading up to the incident, Laura had consumed excessive alcohol, along with a nausea medication meant to induce drowsiness. Despite this, she reportedly had not slept for 4 to 5 days. However, the judge dismissed the appeal, rejecting these arguments, and ordered a court-appointed assessment of Laura by mental health experts. After reviewing the experts' report, the court ultimately overturned its initial decision. It was determined that Laura had the right to an independent expert. Additionally, the defense argued for the cancellation of the preliminary trial and called for a new trial, claiming that a mistake had led to Laura being found guilty. The prosecutor's office was permitted to present evidence of a previous attack committed by Laura. In June 2019, the Kent Supreme Court ruled that the trial court had made an error. The decision quashed Lara's 27-year prison sentence and ordered a new trial. However, despite winning the right to a new trial, Laura chose to avoid the retrial and instead signed a plea agreement. This reduced her sentence to 20 years, and she will become eligible for parole in 2032. Laura is currently being held at the Women's Correctional Facility in Kent. For Carlen's loved ones, Lara's conviction marked the end of the legal process, but it did not heal the pain. Their family will never be the same. Carlen's 2 daughters had to continue their lives without their mother's comforting words and warm embrace. The fact that a family member was responsible for Carlen's tragic death makes this story even more heartbreaking. Laura killed her own mother and has shown no remorse for her actions. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Kathy Lamb. Kathy Lamb lived in an affluent area of Palm Beach. Kathy had a challenging childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she lived with her father. During her teenage years, her mother was absent, which took a significant emotional toll on her. She was self-conscious about her weight, feeling larger than her peers. Fortunately, her stepmother was kind and supportive. Recognizing Kathy's insecurities, she helped her build her confidence, and over time, Kathy became more confident. She started playing sports and trying to lose weight. Kathy was very smart and kind, which helped her make friends in high school. She was active and cheerful, and her problems seemed to disappear when she was with her friends. One of those friends was Jeff. They met when he was 17 and she was 16, and they quickly felt a special connection. Their relationship continued even after they graduated. 2 years later, they secretly married, surprising their families. When their parents found out, they thought the couple was too young to make such a serious decision, but the couple was determined to stay together, despite family pressure. It seemed like the newlyweds had a bright future ahead of them. Jeff worked hard at a local repossessed car park, while Kathy found work as a pharmacist at a pharmacy. She had the necessary education and wanted to advance in the field. Over the years, Jeff remained a tow truck driver, while Kathy became a top pharmacist. A year later, she was offered a job as a district planner for distributing drugs to pharmacies, an opportunity she eagerly accepted. They achieved their dream of owning a home and enjoyed 12 happy years there until a devastating tragedy occurred. On June 15, 2004, Jeff returned home from work at around 7 p.m. He intended to invite his wife to dinner. However, as soon as he entered, he was horrified to see blood all over the hallway, running down the walls. The gruesome evidence of blood splatter and brain matter terrified him. As he called 911, he struggled to speak and held back tears. Initially, the operator mistook his cries for those of a woman, but Jeff eventually plucked up the courage to describe his home, which now looked like the set of a horror movie. At the end of the corridor, there was a significant amount of blood on one wall, as if it had been splattered. Facing this wall, about 1.5 meters away, similar splatters were visible on the opposite wall, and they extended down the stairs leading to the second floor. On the upper level, in the midst of the gruesome scene, lay 30-year-old Kathy, who was unresponsive. The operator attempted to guide Jeff over the phone to provide first aid, but Kathy's injuries were so severe that there was nothing that could be done. When the police arrived, they were taken aback by the horrific sight. It was one of the most brutal crime scenes they had ever encountered. Kathy's body showed multiple severe head injuries from heavy objects. Her skull and face were so badly damaged that they appeared completely disfigured. Although the murder weapon was not found at the scene, a thorough laboratory analysis determined that it was likely a long, heavy object with a hexagonal shape or similar features. Jeff mentioned that he had tried to call his wife several times after 5 p.m. but received no answer, which he found unusual. Concerned, he rushed home to meet her. It turned out that not only Kathy was injured, the couple had 3 large dogs in the house, Jeff's dog and his wife's 2 dogs. Tragically, both of his wife's pets were discovered badly beaten and lying on the floor next to their deceased owner. They had suffered severe head injuries and were barely alive. Unfortunately, the injuries were so extensive that the veterinarians had to euthanize the dogs to relieve their suffering. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff's dog was found locked in his owner's bedroom. Paws from all 3 dogs were found at the scene, along with blood that police believe did not come from the animals. They suspect the blood may have come from a struggle with the killer. The blood has been sent for analysis to determine its source and whether it can help the investigation, and they await the results. Police are uncertain whether the blood on the dogs came from Kathy or whether they fought with the attacker to protect her, resulting in their fatal injuries. Police found the dogs unharmed after the woman had been killed and the fight had begun. The amount of blood on the animals suggests that they had seriously injured the attacker, possibly lacerating an arm or leg. This means that the attacker would have bled profusely, possibly from an open wound, and that he would have sought medical attention at a hospital. The attacker's intentions remain unclear. He may have acted recklessly or out of a deep hatred for his victim, ignoring the large dogs that lived with the family. After examining the crime scene, the police still lacked any concrete leads. They had to wait for the autopsy results to gather more information. In the meantime, they checked all the local hospitals for the injured attacker. Several suspicious people came in with injuries that were found to be unrelated to the incident, as their injuries did not match those of a dog bite. The police began talking to local residents in the hope that someone had seen suspicious activity at Kathy's home or had noticed the criminal fleeing, possibly injured. Unfortunately, no one observed anything unusual. They were also trying to find a motive. Robbery seemed unlikely given the many valuables in the family's home. Only the gold earrings with diamonds that the Kathy was wearing during the attack were missing, while everything else remained untouched. Even the money, which was clearly visible, was not taken. It seems unlikely that a robber would ignore such an opportunity. There were no indications of a break-in, the furniture was undisturbed, drawers were not opened, and belongings were not scattered about, as thieves typically do when they search for valuables. This led the police to explore alternative motives and various theories. The forensic expert determined that the murder occurred between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. Jeff, the first suspect who found the scene, had a strong alibi. At that time, he was on the job and was seen by numerous co-workers. Additionally, he showed no signs of injuries that would typically result from a struggle with the dogs. Just as police were about to clear Jeff of suspicion, an unknown young woman arrived at the family home. Joy Steele came to the house and introduced herself as Jeff's fiancée, which surprised the police, especially since Jeff had been crying earlier. The police found this an interesting case, as a man who had just lost his wife was being comforted by his mistress, with whom he had been in a serious relationship for a long time. This revelation made the case seem even more suspicious. 7 years into their relationship, Kathy discovered Jeff's infidelity. Despite this, they remained together and did not divorce. Kathy forgave him and even encouraged him to end the affair, leading to their reconciliation and continued life together just before the tragic incident. Police are considering whether a love triangle may have been a motive for the crime. Jeff had a strong motive for killing his troubled wife. That doesn't necessarily mean Jeff killed Kathy himself. He may have convinced someone else to do it. The police discovered a third dog locked in one of the rooms, which was unharmed. This was peculiar, especially given the serious injuries of the other 2 dogs belonging to the Kathy. Did the criminal truly hate her to the extent that he chose to ruin everything she cherished? The police needed to find answers to these questions. In the meantime, one of the police was questioning Jeff's mistress, Joy Steele, at the location of the incident. Joy shared her and Jeff's future plans. They planned to move away after a while Jeff planned to quit his job. Joy had a solid alibi. Joy, who was apparently working at a restaurant during the time of the murder, was present, and multiple people could confirm this. In addition, Joy had no injuries on her body. Although the suspicious couple could not have been directly involved in the murder due to their alibis and their lack of injuries, the police have not ruled them out as suspects given the serious circumstances surrounding the crime. They had a strong motive for their plan. The investigation into the crime and the hiring of the killer continues, with the police focusing on identifying potential enemies or those who may have wanted to harm Kathy. However, Kathy's friends and relatives have been unable to identify any enemies, with the exception of her husband. That same day, another suspect emerged. Jeff had another mistress named Lisa. A few weeks before the murder, Lisa's husband, Ray, discovered them together when he came home early from work and found Jeff shirtless on the couch. This confrontation led Ray to kick Jeff out of the house. The next day, Ray calls Lisa and threatens to kill Jeff if he continues with Lisa. Ray emerged as a potential suspect due to his violent nature and apparent motive. However, the situation raised questions about the Kathy. Why did Ray kill Jeff's wife? She had not harmed him and was actually the victim in the scenario, just like Ray. Despite this, Jeff continued to blame Ray. He believed that Ray had gone to the house to carry out his threat against Jeff, but Jeff was not home at the time. It is also possible that upon arriving at Jeff's house, Ray was in danger from Jeff's wife and dogs, so Ray felt compelled to kill her and the dogs. However, this motive does not fit with the extreme violence the killers showed towards Kathy. Her injuries were extremely brutal, suggesting that this was not a random crime, but an act of deep hatred. The police then turned their attention to Lisa, the second lover. Despite her husband's threats, she remained in contact with Jeff. Cell phone records confirmed that they frequently called and texted each other, including at the time of the Kathy's murder. Lisa and her husband Ray were both investigated, but they had solid alibis and were eliminated as suspects. However, the police decided to track the geolocation data of the lovers' mobile devices to gain more details. The call between Lisa and Jeff took place just minutes after the murder. Jeff's cell phone was found near his home, and Jeff was not at work at the time, contrary to what he had previously said. Additionally, Jeff's dog was unharmed, which seems more than just a coincidence. Forensic experts conducted a thorough examination of the animals. They collected DNA samples from the dog's muzzle and paws. Notably, the stains found on Jeff's dog were identified as palm prints. Blood samples taken from the scene were confirmed to belong to the Kathy, indicating that the perpetrator was in the hall with the dog after the attack on Kathy, during which she was injured or possibly killed. Police suspected that the killer's DNA might be on the animal's muzzles and paws. However, the investigation disproved this theory, revealing that the blood was not human, but believed to be from dogs that may have been fighting each other. By analyzing all the new information, police were able to piece together a clearer picture of the events that occurred on that tragic day. Someone entered the house and discovered Kathy along with her 3 large dogs. The attacker hit the woman in the head with a heavy object. 2 dogs were present, also seriously injured and later died. And they did not attack the attacker. They endured the blows without defending themselves. The 3rd dog also did not confront the attacker. Instead, the 3rd dog focused on protecting the other 2 dogs. This behavior aroused suspicion. The police consulted dog handlers for insights. Experts suggested that the dog's lack of resistance indicated they were familiar with the attacker and viewed him as a friend. This familiarity explained why they did not confront him but instead appeared to bite each other. Police found bite marks on the dogs, leading them to conclude that only Jeff, the owner of the surviving dog, could have attacked Kathy. Additionally, geolocation data indicated that the Jeff was near the house, which supported their suspicions. However, the Supreme Court only had circumstantial evidence, meaning they still had a long way to go before bringing any charges. The police needed one crucial piece of information to strengthen their case. With no further clues, the police focused on investigating Jeff's personal life, to understand what might have motivated Jeff to kill his wife. It turned out that the family had recently faced significant financial difficulties, which had affected Jeff for many years before these events. Jeff's boss caught him stealing a large sum of money, about $30,000. Jeff had not spent it all and agreed to return it. He also paid his boss $20,000 in restitution. The police then analyzed Jeff's activities. It turned out that his job brought in only a small income, just enough for his family's needs. He also spent money on his mistress. His wife's income was much higher, but he did not want to tell her about his problems. Jeff was characterized as someone without any remarkable business skills. He was neither particularly foolish nor exceptionally intelligent. His earnings were limited, making the compensation amount a serious financial burden for him. Despite living in an affluent neighborhood, he struggled to come up with the funds. Jeff sought ways to earn extra money or secure a loan, but all these efforts proved fruitless, and the total amount of compensation remained far beyond his reach. He later learned that he was the sole beneficiary of Kathy's life insurance policy, which was worth $29,000. Police believed that this amount of money could solve all of Jeff's financial problems. On the day of the incident, police collected the clothes he was wearing at the time. However, forensic experts conducted a quick test and found no blood or DNA from Kathy on his clothes. The suspect was wearing dark clothing, making it difficult to detect any blood stains. The experts meticulously studied every millimeter of the items using a microscope with 60,000 times magnification. Inside the jeans, they discovered several small red drops, which the forensic team identified as blood. This blood had seeped deep into the fabric fibers, suggesting that it was from high-velocity splashes. This evidence was consistent with the nature of the injuries sustained by the Kathy. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kathy. The police were further surprised when they examined the Jeff's other belongings. They found a gold earring embedded with a diamond in one of his trouser pockets, which he had claimed was stolen during an attack. This indicated that he likely staged the scene and hesitated to dispose of the item to avoid being caught at a pawn shop. To strengthen their case in court, the police needed to find the murder weapon. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to find the weapon. It took the prosecutor's office 2 months to establish a clear connection between the killer and the victim. During this time, an employee of the company where Jeff worked discovered a hexagonal crowbar on the roof of the building. The tool was standard equipment on the company's tow trucks and was available to all employees. What made the crowbar suspicious was the significant amount of blood found on it. The employee promptly notified the police of the discovery. Jeff claimed that he had lost his crowbar and was unable to provide it to the police. This raised suspicions that the bloody crowbar belonged to him and may have been hidden as the murder weapon. The crowbar was sent to a laboratory, where experts compared it to the injuries found on Kathy's head. They concluded that the shape of the tool matched the impact marks. Additionally, the blood found on the crowbar was confirmed to be Kathy's through analysis. Jeff was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Friends knew he had often complained about his troubled marriage. He claimed that Kathy couldn't manage household chores, which made him angry. However, he overlooked that she was the one supporting the family financially and covering their travel expenses, leaving her little time for housework. Jeff's car was always cluttered with garbage, yet he continued to blame Kathy. He frequently talked to friends about wanting to end their relationship, and several acquaintances reported that he was considering divorce. Kathy was unhappy in her marriage to Jeff due to his betrayals and chaotic lifestyle, which she knew about. She often vented her frustrations to friends but couldn't bring herself to leave him because she loved him deeply. Despite her unhappiness, she stayed with Jeff, trying to tolerate his behavior. For Jeff, murder seemed like a better option than going through a divorce. He was in dire financial straits after stealing $30,000 at work, which had severely impacted his finances. If he divorced Kathy, they would have to divide their assets, and he risked losing their home. He felt he had nothing left to lose, as a divorce would leave him with little since Kathy could claim most of their assets. Jeff figured that by committing murder, he could use the life insurance payout to pay off his debts, keeping part of the money to start a new life with his mistress. Jeff had promised to make a choice between his 2 girlfriends, Lisa and Joy, but the decision remained a secret. During the investigation, police uncovered more details about the crime. On the day it happened, Jeff left for work but had actually planned to kill his wife. He drove a tow truck to a gas station, pretending he needed to fill it up. His absence from work was noted, and during that time, he returned home to wait for his wife to return. He was familiar with her daily routine, so he did not have to wait long. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff brutally killed his wife's dogs with a crowbar. The dogs, confused and frightened, began to fight. To stop the chaos, Jeff hit each dog on the head and then took his pet, Netarunu, into a room and locked the door. After the incident, he removed his wife's diamond earrings, intending to make it look like a robbery. He discarded some of his clothes, taking off his shirt and shoes, but he kept the jeans he wore during the massacre, likely overlooking the bloodstains on them. This oversight allowed forensic experts to find tiny drops of blood on the jeans, linking him to the crime. His lover called him while he was near his home, which revealed his location on the phone. When he arrived at the station, he attempted to dispose of the crowbar used in the attack, but did so carelessly, simply throwing it onto the roof of a utility building and not washing it. He believed the tool would never be discovered. Jeff was convicted of premeditated murder, due to financial difficulties he thought he could overcome by collecting life insurance from his wife's death. Prosecutors presented substantial evidence linking him to the crime scene, the murder weapon, and the victim. His fingerprints were found on the crowbar, along with Kathy's blood on his clothing. He had attempted to stage a robbery and failed to completely conceal the earrings that were believed to have been stolen. Several people testified about domestic problems. Kathy still hoped to reconcile with her husband, despite being devastated by his betrayal. She truly loved him and was undaunted by his financial difficulties. What she craved most was love and understanding. Unfortunately, Jeff did not want to rekindle their relationship. Instead, he planned a murder that he believed would net him $29,000. It is suspected that Joy, one of Jeff's lovers, knew of his intentions. Jeff promised her a future together, on the condition that she pay off the debt he would incur from his crimes. During the hearing, the defense attempted to portray Jeff as a model husband and a good person, but no witness could reliably substantiate this claim. Jeff had never been a hard worker and showed little interest in his work. He had no motivation to do anything else and did not have a positive reputation in his family life. He was not a good husband, as he had a history of infidelity that his late wife knew about. His lifestyle was well known to friends and family. But it was his wife who suffered the most. When Jeff's efforts to build a better image failed, his attorney changed tactics. He began looking for weaknesses in the prosecution's case. However, the prosecution's strategy was well rehearsed and backed by substantial evidence, leaving little room for debate. The defense argued that Jeff was not the only possible suspect in Kathy's murder, claiming that the police had focused too quickly on him without fully exploring other potential suspects. In fact, police and the prosecutor's office had interviewed dozens of people and considered multiple suspects. Each suspect was thoroughly questioned, allowing police to eliminate those who did not fit the evidence. The prosecution argued that the attacker had two motives. First, he hoped to solve his financial problems through a life insurance policy. Second, he wanted to get rid of his troubled wife so he could live with one of his mistresses. Additionally, he sought to avoid the risk of losing his assets or having to divide his assets in a divorce. The prosecution also argued that Jeff's mistress, Lisa, knew about his plans. She supported him and was waiting for the call to hear about the progress of the crime. Her indiscretion led her to call Jeff, which provided the police with a vital clue. Investigations were conducted to determine whether the mistresses were involved in planning or organizing the crime, but the results were negative. However, it is clear that they supported the Jeff, even though they should have reported his bad intentions to the police to prevent the murder. Ultimately, no evidence was found to prove the lovers' guilt or involvement, so they faced no consequences in court. In September 2006, Jeff Lamb was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life without parole. As the verdict was read, Lisa wept uncontrollably in court. Kathy's family believes the court's ruling was fair. In Kathy's mother's opinion, Jeff should rot behind bars for the rest of his life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jock Waller. June 1, 2011 marked a turning point in the life of the Jock Waller family. That day, Jock called her sister Cheryl to say that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay Waller and would be home later. However, Jock never returned and did not call back. After trying to contact her sister without success, Cheryl became increasingly worried. To address her concerns, she drove to the police station around 7 p.m. At the station, Cheryl announced that Clay Waller had killed younger sister. It was a shocking statement for all the police, as Jock had only called Cheryl a few hours earlier and there was no reason to be alarmed and assume that she was in trouble. But it turned out that Cheryl's hunch was correct, and her sister Jock was indeed caught up in a macabre story. So what happened to Jock, and what made Cheryl really believe that Clay Waller had killed her sister even before Jock was reported missing. Jock was a sweet, kind, and caring girl when she met Clay, and they hit it off. Clay had a stutter that caused some people to make fun of him, which made him feel self-conscious. Jock, however, was different. She never made fun of him and always protected him, making sure he didn't get hurt. That was her nature. She protected the vulnerable, fought against injustice, and helped people. As their love blossomed, Jock and Clay became closer and eventually married when they were in their 30s. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, and Jock was building a family there. Jock had a successful career, unlike her husband, whose life was constantly failing and couldn't stay in one place for long. As a result, Jock was the sole provider for the family. She had always dreamed of having children, and when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She was even more delighted to learn that she would be having triplets. The couple welcomed 2 daughters, Avery and Addison, and a son named Maddox. Caring for 3 newborns at once was a huge challenge for Jock, but she did not complain. Instead, she took on the responsibility alone, as her husband seemed indifferent to the children. Clay took a job at the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife took care of the children, but he did not stay long. He was fired after a year, and during that time, only Jock's parents and sister helped her with the children so she could rest. After Clay lost her job, Jock began working to support the family. Despite having a child, Clay did not change his habits and showed little interest in his family or his job. Occasionally, he took on a part-time job, but it did not bring in the income they needed. He seemed content to live off Jock, who worked 40 hours a week while still caring for the children. Jock's career took off, leading her to a management position at an insurance company. However, this success only made her husband more comfortable, and he decided not to worry about money anymore. Instead of appreciating his wife, Clay abused her in every way possible. He insulted her, called her worthless, and told her that no one wanted her. He had affairs with other women. Jock's parents and sister were extremely outraged by her husband's behavior and convinced her to divorce him. However, at that time, Jock was not ready for such an extreme choice and tried to keep her family together. Every day, any hope of saving her marriage went up in smoke before her eyes. A few years later, the couple began to have problems. They were in financial trouble because her husband was not working and Jock's salary was not enough to support their growing family. The mortgage debts kept mounting and they were in danger of losing their home. Jock decided to move in with her sister, while her husband stayed with a friend. By this time, the children were a little older and Jock made the difficult but necessary decision for herself to get a divorce because she felt that she and the children deserved a better life. She talked to her husband about it, and at first, Clay took the news calmly. However, he later changed his mind and refused to divorce. Clay began to threaten Jock. At first, the threats were indirect and vague, but eventually, he directly threatened her life, claiming that divorcing him would be a death sentence for her and the children. This scared Jock, but she did not give up on her decision. She could not continue living this way and sought to distance herself from her husband. Jock confided in her family about Clay's behavior and kept a diary of his disturbing actions. She also noted that her husband had been following her. At the time, Jock and the children were staying with her sister. The children, who were only 5 years old, did not understand the situation, but Jock explained that it was necessary. Eventually, things began to return to normal and the divorce proceedings were almost complete. Clay seemed to have accepted the divorce and stopped bothering Jock. The two began to move forward and began to build a new relationship. Jock allowed her husband to visit the children and they stopped arguing. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jock scheduled a meeting at the lawyer's office to discuss the final important details of the divorce. That day, their son Maddox was with his father, while the other children were at Jock's sister Cheryl's house. After the meeting, Jock planned to pick up her son. When she left the office, she called her sister Cheryl and told her everything had gone well. She drove to Clay's house to pick up her son and then made plans to return to her sister's house. That was their last conversation. Jock, 39, never heard from her again. Over time, Cheryl grew worried and started calling Jock, but she didn't answer. Cheryl then tried calling Clay, but he didn't answer either. Cheryl suspected that Clay might have done something to Jock, so she texted him, "If I don't hear from Jock in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." Clay immediately called her back, asking what was wrong. Cheryl replied that he knew exactly what she meant. But Clay insisted that he did not know where Jock was and promised to tell her to call Cheryl back when he saw her. Doubting him, Cheryl took younger sister children to her parents' house and filed a police report herself. The police were wary of Cheryl's claim that Clay was involved in her sister's disappearance, but did not send her home to wait for 24 hours to pass. Instead, they quickly decided to contact Clay to find out if there was any clue as to Jock's whereabouts. They called Clay, and he said that he had lunch with Jock. He said that they had met at the lawyer's office to discuss some aspects of the divorce and then drove to his house to talk further. He said they had a chat and then he went to the store. When he returned, Jock's car was gone and he assumed that she had left. According to Clay, their son Maddox was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and Jock knew this and was not concerned about their son. He insisted that she had come to his house just to talk, not for their son. Clay's words seemed hard to believe. Jock had made it clear to her sister that she had come to Clay's house for her son. She had no intention of discussing anything with him, especially since she would not allow her son to be with another woman so far away. She would have been furious with Clay in that situation. Cheryl did not believe the story. She convinced the police that Clay was lying and hiding something, and that things were indeed serious. Jock and her car were reported missing, and a massive search began. Hours later, Jock's car, a Honda Pilot, was found on the interstate with flat tires. It was no accident. The tires had been deliberately punctured and looked like they had been set up. The car was found open and empty, with some blood on the back seat, but there were no clues to Jock's whereabouts. It seemed increasingly likely that she had been attacked and kidnapped. The search for Jock focused on that area, with many volunteers working alongside police and rescue dogs. Despite the unbearable heat, people were eager to help. The family offered a $3,500 reward for any information about Jock's whereabouts. Despite their efforts, the search was unsuccessful. The police began to focus more on her ex-husband, Clay. They went to his house to talk to him again, but Clay repeated the same story. When police asked to search his home and car, Clay refused and immediately hired a lawyer to defend his rights. For days after she disappeared, Clay left his wife a tearful voicemail, "Hi honey, it's Sunday. I went missing on Wednesday. Please, if you get this message, call me. I don't know where you are and I miss you so much. Please call me." The police then obtained a search warrant and returned to his home. While examining the car, they discovered stains that looked like blood. The forensic team collected samples and sent them for testing, which showed that they were fish blood. It turned out that Clay had intentionally covered the car with fish blood to throw the forensic experts off. When the house was inspected, it was noticed that the floor had no carpet. A section of the floor had been cut out, leaving a noticeable mark. Small drops of blood were found on the basement hallway wall. There were signs that furniture had been moved. Something unusual was going on in the house. The forensic team checked under the floor and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood and carpet samples were sent to the lab for analysis. The police tracked Jock's last movements. At 1:10 a.m., she was seen at a pharmacy with her ex-husband. They appeared to be normal, 2 hours later, Jock was caught on camera. ATM security recorded the withdrawal. Jock did not appear on the surveillance camera afterward, while Clay did. Hours later, Clay, his son, and his new girlfriend went to a toy store. They then went to a car wash in his pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. Clay changed clothes and washed the car and boat. Suspicion grew around Clay, and he became the prime suspect. Police released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, asking any witnesses who saw them to come forward. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River, which was later confirmed by Clay's cell phone records. This prompted police to conduct a search of the area, but despite their efforts, nothing was found. At that time, forensic testing revealed that drops of blood found in Clay's home matched those of the missing woman, Jock. Based on this evidence, the police suspected that Jock was likely dead. The police brought Clay in for questioning and attempted to get him to confess to the murder. However, he refused to admit to any wrongdoing, instead claiming that it was old blood from a domestic violence incident in the kitchen. Without a body, the police could not arrest a suspect and charge him. They released Clay but continued to monitor and investigate him. Clay, who had worked as a deputy sheriff, knew full well that the police were watching him, and he played a cat-and-mouse game with them. He would go to deserted vacant lots to disrupt the investigation while the entire neighborhood was involved in the search for Jock, the missing mother of 3 children. Clay continued to harass the search party and Jock's family. He drove by, insulting them and yelling that they were wasting their time, claiming that they wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more and more suspicions. Meanwhile, Jock's sister, Cheryl, sought custody of the triplets, fearing for their safety as Clay was their father. Clay's erratic behavior eventually led to Cheryl gaining custody, which angered him even more. He began threatening Cheryl with violence, even posting about it on social media. Cheryl recorded these threats and reported them to the police. Nearly 5 months after Jock's disappearance, police arrested Clay and charged him with making threats to death. Although he admitted to the charges, Clay claimed he acted out of anger and despair over losing custody of the children, with no intention of harming Cheryl. He believes he is the victim in this situation. During the investigation, police discover that Clay is being accused of stealing $50,000 from a previous company and stalking a man. Despite this, Clay denies any involvement in Jock's disappearance. When questioned, Clay claims that Jock's new lover, Harry, is responsible for her death. However, police investigate Harry and discover that he has a solid alibi, eliminating him as a suspect. The evidence points to Clay, but he continues to deny any wrongdoing. He is eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for threatening his wife's sister, Cheryl. Police continue to investigate Jock's disappearance, searching Devil's Island but finding no trace of her. 2 years after her disappearance, police had gathered enough circumstantial evidence, including video footage and blood found in Clay's home, to charge him with Jock's murder, even though her body had never been found. It was a risky move, because if they lost, the DA's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. Clay, after consulting with his attorney, made a deal with the prosecutor to reduce his sentence. Clay offered to plead guilty to murder and provide a burial site. Jock's family agreed to the deal because it was important to find her body and give her a proper burial. Clay led police to his ex-wife's burial site. It was located in a remote location on a sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. The initial investigation was hampered because Clay could not remember the exact tree in which he had buried Jock's body. However, he eventually revealed that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her grave. A gardener pointed out that large amounts of fertilizer could kill trees, leading the police to focus on 3 dead trees in the area. When they dug up the grave, they found Jock's body under one of the trees, wearing the same clothes she had last worn. The woman was identified from dental records as Jock Waller. The discovery of Jock's body brought closure to her loved ones, who were finally able to hold a funeral for her. Ironically, the ceremony was held on her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. At this time, Cheryl had to tell her children that their mother had died and that their father was responsible for her death. This revelation was devastating to the children, who not only lost their mother, but also their relationship with their father. The children immediately shunned Clay and refused to communicate with him. As part of his plea agreement, Clay was required to provide a detailed confession of his crimes. According to his statement, he began thinking about murder a year before Jock died, after she announced that she wanted to end their relationship. Despite these dark thoughts, he initially pushed them aside because Jock was the mother of his children. Clay felt he couldn't let Jock take his children. He had warned her earlier that if she continued to do so, things would not end well for her, but she chose to ignore him. The night before the murder, he had dug a grave for Jock on Devil's Island. It was then that he began to consider taking her life. At the time, their divorce seemed to be going smoothly. After visiting a lawyer, the couple had a conversation in which Jock suggested they have one last intimate encounter together. They went to his house, where they continued the conversation in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator to find a snack. When he raised his head, he accidentally hit Jock on the head, causing her nose to bleed. This enraged her, and she stormed out into the hallway. She began screaming that he would never see their children again. This was Clay's breaking point. In a fit of rage, he punched her in the face and then strangled her. After the fight, he dumped Jock's body in a prepared grave on Devil's Island. He then cleaned up the crime scene by washing his car, cleaning the house, and showering. He changed into new clothes and attempted to resume his normal routine by meeting his new girlfriend and son at a toy store, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Clay claimed the murder was an impulsive act driven by emotion, contradicting his earlier statement about digging the grave the day before. This inconsistency raised suspicions of premeditated murder. The medical examiner's report showed that the victim had suffered multiple skull fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma rather than a simple fight. Clay's initial story was not believed. Clay seemed content with his 20-year sentence for second-degree murder, showing no remorse for killing his ex-wife Jock. However, the prosecution had a surprising twist. The hole he dug to bury Jock was in another state, Illinois, and the murder took place in Missouri. These features fall under federal laws against domestic violence across states, and he violated them. This allowed him to add 35 years to his sentence. Clay Waller would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. Clay had no idea that his confession would have serious consequences due to a federal law he was unaware of. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana, to carnival workers Lester and Betty Likens. She was the third of 5 children, and her childhood was marked by frequent moves and financial hardship. Sylvia's siblings included 2 sets of twins, older twins Daniel and Diana, and younger twins Benny and Jenny. Jenny suffered from polio, which left her with a limp and weak legs, requiring her to wear a steel brace for support. Due to her parents' unstable marriage and nomadic lifestyle, Sylvia and Jenny often stayed with their grandmother, providing a safer and more stable environment. This arrangement allowed the girls to maintain a steady education despite the family's frequent travels. Sylvia began taking on responsibilities at a young age. She babysat, ran errands for neighbors and friends, and helped with household chores such as ironing. This allowed her to earn some money to buy things she wanted, and she often shared the money with her mother. Those who knew Sylvia described her as a friendly, confident, and charming girl with long, wavy, light brown hair that fell to her shoulders. Her friends affectionately called her Cookie. However, despite her outgoing personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile because she had lost a front tooth due to a childhood accident while playing with one of her brothers. Sylvia often took Jenny to the local skating rink, where she would help her skate by holding her hand. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny lived with their parents in Indianapolis. However, their mother was arrested and jailed for theft in July. Their father, Lester, then arranged for his young daughters to stay with Gertrude Benizzi, a mother of 2 daughters, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Sylvia sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude agreed to care for the girls as her own until Lester returned. After July 4th, Sylvia and Jenny moved into Gertrude's home at 3850 East New York Street. Meanwhile, their father, brother, and later their mother traveled to the East Coast for the festival. Gertrude would receive $20 a week to care for the sisters until November. At first, things seemed normal at Gertrude's house. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, and they enjoyed activities such as singing along to pop songs and helping around the house. The Sylvia sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Benizzi children, and Sylvia was praised by the pastor for her kindness and respect. Problems arose, however, when Sylvia's father, Lester, began to pay Gertrude late, often a day or 2 after the due date. These delays frustrated Gertrude, leading her to abuse the sisters. She began to spank their bare bottoms with various objects, such as a 1/4-inch paddle, and curse them. As the late payments became more frequent, the abuse and beatings escalated. On one occasion, Paula reported that Sylvia and her sisters had eaten too much at church dinner. As a result, both girls were spanked about 15 times on the back with the paddle. This occurred just a month after they moved in with Gertrude's family, in late August. Gertrude's behavior became increasingly abusive, with Sylvia as the primary target. It is possible that Gertrude's jealousy of Sylvia's youth and beauty contributed to her actions. Over time, the abuse became worse, with more frequent beatings. Sylvia was often starved. They were given only leftovers or spoiled food from the trash. On one occasion, she was falsely accused of stealing candy that she had actually bought. On another occasion, she was publicly humiliated when Sylvia told Stephanie and Jenny about a boyfriend she had in Long Beach, whom she had met while her family was living in California. She shared stories of her time with him, including one in which she snuggled under the covers with him. Gertrude asked Sylvia why she did that, and Sylvia shrugged and said she didn't know. A few days later, Gertrude brought up the subject again, this time making a sarcastic comment about Sylvia's growing belly and hinting that she might be pregnant. Sylvia thought Gertrude was joking and joked along. However, Gertrude continued to make things worse, repeatedly mentioning Sylvia's interactions with Son and hinting that she was pregnant. The situation turned violent when Gertrude suddenly kicked Sylvia in the genitals. Gertrude's overweight and pregnant daughter, Paula, who was jealous of Sylvia's appearance, joined in the attack. She pulled Sylvia out of the chair and onto the kitchen floor, screaming that Sylvia didn't deserve to sit in the chair. In another incident, while the family was having dinner, Gertrude, Paula, and a neighbor boy, Randy Gordon Lepper, forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog filled with mustard, ketchup, and relish. As expected, Sylvia vomited, and they brutally forced her to swallow what she had vomited. Sylvia was so upset that she spread rumors at school, accusing Stephanie and Paula of prostitution. When a boy at school approached Stephanie with offers, saying that Sylvia was the one who spread the rumors, Stephanie confronted Sylvia when she got home. Sylvia confessed to being the one who spread the rumors. Then, in retaliation, Stephanie punched her very hard. Sylvia apologized and cried. Stephanie's 15-year-old boyfriend, Randolph Hubbard, found out about the incident and the rumors, and then violently assaulted Sylvia. He slapped her, slammed her head against the wall, and threw her to the floor. Stephanie's mother, Gertrude, also joined in, hitting Sylvia several times with a paddle. Daily life at Gertrude's house was a nightmare of increasingly violent episodes. On one occasion, Paula punched Sylvia in the face so hard that she broke her own wrist, concentrating her blows on Sylvia's mouth and eyes. Paula then used a brace on her arm to beat Sylvia even harder. The abuse the Sylvia sisters suffered was not limited to physical violence. Gertrude also abused them verbally and psychologically. On one occasion, she falsely accused Sylvia of being a slut and a prostitute, criticizing the immorality of prostitution and the degradation of women. Gertrude then forced her younger sister Jenny to beat her, threatening that if she refused, she would suffer the same abuse as Sylvia. The Sylvia sisters were abused not only by Gertrude's family, but also by Coy Hubbard and his classmates, who frequently visited Gertrude's home. They would verbally and physically abuse Sylvia, and often with the participation of Gertrude and her children. Neighborhood children also frequently beat Sylvia, using her as a punching bag in violent judo training sessions. They would burn her body, burn her skin with sticks, and cause severe injuries to her genitals. In one particularly humiliating incident, Sylvia was forced to strip in the living room and masturbate with a bottle. Gertrude would later tell everyone that this humiliating act was to show Jenny what kind of person her sister was. Over time, Gertrude banned Sylvia from school after she confessed to stealing a gym outfit from school. Sylvia had taken the outfit because Gertrude had not bought her clothes. As a result, Sylvia's education was disrupted and she was severely punished. Gertrude regularly beat her with a 7-inch police belt. The situation escalated when Gertrude changed the subject to premarital sex and then kicked Sylvia in the genitals. During this attack, Stephanie defended Sylvia, shouting, "She didn't do anything." Gertrude continued to torture her by burning Sylvia's fingertips with matches before continuing to beat her. A few days later, Gertrude used a police belt to beat Jenny several times. Jenny is said to have taken a tennis shoe from school to put on her stronger foot. As the torture and abuse worsened, Sylvia was not allowed to use the bathroom and was forced to wet the bed as punishment for her incontinence. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude took Sylvia to the basement, tied her up, and barely fed or watered her. She was often tied to the basement stair railing with her feet barely touching the ground. Gertrude's family would occasionally stop abusing Sylvia to watch their favorite television show. Sylvia's tragic ordeal even involved the neighborhood children, who paid 5 cents each to participate in her humiliation, beating, burning, and eventually mutilation during her captivity in the basement. Gertrude and her children bound and gagged Sylvia, then placed her in a bathtub filled with hot water and rubbed salt into her wounds. After this incident, the father of a neighbor boy named Michael John Monroe anonymously called the Arsenal School to report that a girl with sores all over her body was living at Gertrude's house. A school nurse came to Gertrude's house to investigate, as Sylvia had been absent from school for several days. However, Gertrude lied to the nurse, saying that Sylvia had run away the previous week and that she did not know where she was. Gertrude attributed Sylvia's sores to poor personal hygiene. Gertrude also claimed that Sylvia had been a negative influence on both her children and her sister. The school did not investigate further, neglecting to check on Sylvia's health or whereabouts. In mid-October, Gertrude's son, John Banaszewski Jr., played a cruel prank on Sylvia. He offered her a plate of soup, but quickly snatched it away when she tried to eat it with her hands. By this time, Sylvia was severely malnourished. Gertrude allowed Sylvia to sleep upstairs that night, but only if she did not wet the bed. Before going to bed, Sylvia secretly asked Jenny for a glass of water. The next morning, Gertrude discovered that Sylvia had accidentally wet the bed. To punish Sylvia, Gertrude forced her to masturbate again with a glass jar in front of Gertrude's children. Immediately afterwards, Gertrude yelled at Sylvia to go back to the kitchen. She then ordered Sylvia to strip. Gertrude told Sylvia, "You branded my daughter, now I will brand you." Using a hot needle, Gertrude began carving the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach. While Gertrude was still carving, she told 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish carving the words into Sylvia's skin. Meanwhile, Gertrude took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. Richard continued carving the words into Sylvia's stomach as she gritted her teeth and groaned in pain. Later, Richard and 10-year-old Shirley took Sylvia into the basement. They tried to burn the letter "Des" under Sylvia's left breast with an anchor bolt. The resulting deep burn scar looked like the number 3. That terrible night, Sylvia confided in her younger sister Jenny, saying that she was sure she would die from the unbearable abuse. The next day, Gertrude forced Sylvia to write a letter, the contents to fool her parents into thinking that Sylvia had run away from Gertrude's house. The letter was intended to falsely accuse a group of local boys of mistreating and harming Sylvia, claiming that she had initially consented to sexual intercourse with them. After the letter was written, Gertrude planned to have John Jr. and Jenny blindfold Sylvia, take her to a nearby wooded area called Jimmy Woods, and leave her for dead. However, this plan was not immediately carried out. Instead, Sylvia was tied to the railing of the basement stairs. Gertrude offered her biscuits, but Sylvia refused, offering to give them to the dog. Angered, Gertrude stuffed the biscuits into Sylvia's mouth, and she and her son John began to beat Sylvia savagely, aiming for her stomach. On October 26th, Sylvia's condition worsened. She had difficulty speaking and could no longer move her limbs properly. Gertrude took her into the kitchen, pressed her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk, but Sylvia was unable to hold the glass of milk properly. Gertrude became frustrated and assaulted Sylvia. After being thrown to the floor and returned to the basement, Sylvia became delirious, moaning and mumbling continuously. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia could not read past the first 4 letters, indicating that her cognitive abilities were severely impaired. She was also unable to get up from the floor. That afternoon, a group of neighborhood tormentors gathered in the basement, and Sylvia attempted to identify them, waving her arms and shouting names. However, her efforts were hampered by her increasingly deteriorating physical and mental condition. After being repeatedly abused, Sylvia attempted to escape from the basement but collapsed from exhaustion before reaching the stairs. As a result, she faced severe punishment. Gertrude hit Sylvia hard on the head, knocking her unconscious, then stood there watching her for a while. At 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs arrived at Gertrude's house and went straight to the basement. There, he found Stephanie crying, holding Sylvia's weak and badly injured body. Her mother Gertrude instructed Stephanie to clean Sylvia, but Stephanie and Richard decided instead to bathe Sylvia with warm soapy water and dress her in clean clothes. After bathing, they placed Sylvia on a mattress in one of the bedrooms. In her final moments, Sylvia expressed her final wishes, to be with her father or at least taken home. After enduring severe punishment and weakened by lack of food, she eventually died from her injuries. When Stephanie discovered that Sylvia was no longer breathing, she attempted to revive her with artificial respiration. Meanwhile, Gertrude claimed that Sylvia had been faking her death. Initially, Gertrude beat Sylvia's body with a book. When Sylvia was found dead, Gertrude panicked and ordered Richard Hobbs to call the police from a nearby pay phone. When the police arrived at the address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude led them to the bedroom, where they found Sylvia's badly beaten and mutilated body on a dirty mattress. Gertrude gave the police a letter that Sylvia had been forced to write. Gertrude claimed that she had cared for Sylvia for more than an hour before her death and had applied antiseptic to her wounds in an attempt to provide first aid. She told the police that Sylvia had run away with some teenagers earlier, but had returned that afternoon, topless and holding the note. Holding a Bible, Paula told everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was preordained. She then turned to Jenny and calmly said, "If you want to stay with us, we will treat you like one of our sisters." However, Jenny was urged to say something to the police before they arrived. Jenny recounted the events leading up to Sylvia's death at the request of Gertrude's family. Jenny then whispered to the police to take them away, and she told them everything. Jenny Lycan's official statement led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Banaszewski on suspicion of Sylvia's murder, just hours after her body was discovered. Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crime on the same day. Gertrude and Coy Hubbard's 3 older children were taken to a nearby juvenile detention center, while Gertrude and Richard Hobbs' younger children were detained at the Indianapolis Children's Home. All were held without bail until trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia Lycan's death. However, within a day of her arrest, she admitted to knowing the children and admitted that her daughter, Paula, and Coy Hubbard had physically and mentally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing Sylvia to sleep in the basement 3 times after she wet the bed. When asked about possible causes of Sylvia's incontinence, including emotional distress and kidney injury, Gertrude was evasive. Paula showed no remorse and signed a statement admitting to repeatedly hitting Sylvia. She also admitted to other acts of cruelty, such as pushing Sylvia down the basement stairs multiple times. John Jr. admitted to hitting Sylvia and frequently abusing her with his fists. He also confessed to burning Sylvia with matches on multiple occasions and said that his mother had burned Sylvia with cigarettes on multiple occasions. Sylvia Lycan's autopsy revealed severe and widespread injuries, with over 150 separate wounds throughout her body. She was severely malnourished at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, type, severity, and stage of healing, and included burns, severe bruising, and significant damage to muscles and nerves. In addition, her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, and the autopsy found that her hymen was intact, refuting Gertrude's claim that Sylvia was 3 months pregnant and the allegations of prostitution and promiscuity. Sylvia Lycan's official cause of death was severe head trauma resulting in bleeding into the brain. The cause was a blow to the right side of her head. The doctor also noted that Sylvia's body had suffered severe damage from prolonged abuse of her skin and underlying tissues, as well as prolonged malnutrition. Sylvia's body was found and it was estimated that she had likely died within 8 hours of her discovery. An autopsy revealed that Sylvia had been recently bathed, possibly after her death, which could have affected the rate of loss of body temperature and the onset of rigor mortis. Gertrude Banaszewski, her children Paula and John, and 2 young neighbors, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted in May 1966 for the neglect, torture, and murder of Sylvia. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury found Gertrude guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison. She was paroled in 1985. Paula was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. She later appealed and was retried in 1971, where she pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 2 to 21 years in prison. She was released from prison in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were convicted of manslaughter and spent less than 2 years in the Indiana House of Reform before being paroled on February 27, 1968. Indiana residents consider the torture and murder of Sylvia Lycan to be the worst crime in the state's history. Sylvia died on October 26 in Indianapolis, Indiana, before her parents could return to pick her and her sister up in November. The sisters did not want to report the increasing abuse and neglect to family members or school, fearing that speaking out would only make things worse. Jenny, the younger sister, was threatened by Gertrude that she would be abused and tortured like her sister if she spoke up. Jenny was also bullied by neighborhood girls, who would taunt or attack her whenever she mentioned her sister's plight. Neighbors, including a middle-aged couple who lived nearby, saw signs that the girls were being abused, but no one dared to report it to the police. All those involved in Sylvia's torture and murder were sentenced to prison. Although some perpetrators do not serve full prison sentences, they will forever be haunted by the consequences and horror of their actions. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Zara Alena. Zara Alena was born in England in the winter of 1986. As the eldest of 5 children, Zara's birth held great significance, symbolizing her mother's aspirations for a better future. Additionally, she was the first granddaughter of Radha Parvin, a distinction that earned her special respect and status within the family. Growing up, Zara was doted on by her relatives and raised in a multi-generational household. Despite their financial struggles, Zara's parents prioritized her education, believing it would provide her with a good life. Zara's family had big plans for her future, but their hopes were overshadowed by the dangers and difficulties that surrounded them, putting Zara's safety at risk. Zara had an unrelenting passion and thirst for life from a very young age. This led her to develop a love for tap dancing, a form of self-expression where each step brought out a rhythm that evoked a sense of harmony. Additionally, and swimming, which gave her a sense of freedom from the monotony of daily life. Her exquisite style and artistic approach to fashion allowed her to express her dreams through her outfits. However, these pursuits were just the beginning of her journey. Her first experience with skating ignited a new sense of freedom within her. Skating evolved into more than just a hobby for her. It became a powerful outlet for self-expression, allowing her to connect with her deepest emotions and inner self. Those close to Zara were unsurprised when she shared her aspiration to become a lawyer, driven by a desire to protect and support others. Her warm personality spread happiness and positivity, making those around her feel uplifted and inspired. Zara's eyes sparkled, and her gaze was captivating. Her curly black hair added to her striking appearance. She has a magnetic appeal, combining qualities such as passion, kindness, and courage, along with undeniable charm. As a teenager, she had the chance to explore England, visiting museums and galleries that fueled her interest in art and culture. Her travels showcased independence and unrelenting passion for knowledge and discovery. Following her initial trips, she later traveled to other parts of Europe. These adventures show that she inherited her family's passion for discovery and exploration of new things. Zara's aunt, Farah, was a significant influence on her. Unlike many others who chose to settle in the UK, Farah settled in Portugal. What captivated Zara was her aunt's work as a psychotherapist, particularly her involvement with women's organizations. As a result, Zara made it a point to visit her aunt on multiple occasions. Zara began turning her dreams into a reality when she earned admission to the University of Westminster immediately after high school graduation. She dedicated herself to pursuing her objectives, all while taking care of her mother and grandmother at the same time. Although she was short, she had endless energy and a deeply passionate personality. Zara is a compassionate person who has positively impacted the lives of many refugees forced to flee their homes due to conflict, she using her influence to speak out about their stories. She also volunteered at community canteens, aiding the homeless. Zara has a remarkable talent for understanding what others need, and she always makes time for them a priority in her busy schedule. Her easygoing personality made her a delight to be around. She frequently visited her aunt, Smee Naz, who lived nearby, often seeking her help with exam preparation, but their study sessions inevitably turned into laughter-filled moments. Those who knew Zara remember that she brought happiness wherever she went. Moreover, she was diligent, covering her own expenses and providing support to her family. Zara was a familiar face at a local clothing store, where she worked and interacted with everyone in the community, from teenagers to the elderly. Her kindness and willingness to help others were notable traits. Despite being talkative, she was a good listener and extended her generosity to all living beings, especially cats. She would often spend her own money to care for stray cats, taking them to the vet or convincing neighbors to adopt them. Zara's friend, Sanji Naira, described her as radiant and thought that her most significant gift was her ability to share optimism with others. Whenever Sanji was down, he would turn to Zara for help. Zara had a special person in her life, Carissa Peters, who was more than just a friend. They formed a strong bond as they fought together for justice and women's rights, a common goal that forged a lasting friendship despite life's obstacles. They felt a strong sense of comfort and familiarity in each other's homes and maintained a daily phone routine, using this time to share news, discuss their thoughts, and make plans for the future. After passing her exams and completing her law internship in 2002, Zara had the opportunity to work at the Crown Prosecution Service. This was a significant step toward realizing her dream of becoming a full-fledged lawyer. To achieve this, Zara persevered with her work despite facing many difficulties, including worries from her mother and grandmother, as well as financial struggles. This achievement was significant for her and for the people who believed in, supported her through the challenges she faced on her path to a better life. On her first day at the new job, Zara felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. She shared a smiley selfie with friends and family, as if announcing the start of a new chapter in her life to the world. This new job was the final piece in the puzzle of her dreams, a culmination of years of hard work. Although being an administrator might seem like a secondary role to some, it was a significant milestone for Zara. At 35 years old, she entered a new phase of her life, which sparked in her a sense of excitement and determination that filled her with a clear direction and goal. This wasn't just another working day. It marked the beginning of a new era in her life, one where she felt truly fulfilled and happy. The new job boosted Zara's confidence, and she felt it was time to start her own family. She envisioned her children living happy, protected lives filled with love and harmony. With each passing day, Zara saw herself moving closer to her dream of having a family. Her life was busy with work, volunteering, friends, and support from her mother and grandmother, who shared her home and provided care when needed. Despite her packed schedule, Zara enjoyed walking and valued her freedom of movement. She didn't let small things hold her back and would often carry a spare pair of shoes in her bag to change into sneakers when needed. Zara believed that women should be able to move freely without any obstacles or restrictions. However, a man named Jordan McSweeney, who lived nearby, posed a threat to Zara's freedom. Jordan was a few years younger than Zara, and his origins were unknown. One Saturday evening, after the sun had set, Zara was on her way to meet a friend. Despite not being in the mood, but she chose not to cancel, honoring her commitment. Zara was recognized for being extremely reliable and keeping her commitments, especially to her friends. Before leaving, she called Aunt Farah, but this time, a hint of anxiety crept into her voice. Aunt Farah cautioned Zara to be careful, and although she wasn't venturing far from home, the evening atmosphere felt unusual and unpredictable. Zara assured herself that she was familiar with every part of the city and that people knew who she was. Nevertheless, something about this evening unsettled her, making her heart beat faster, and she decided to exercise extra caution. Zara met her friend at the Ilford Big Spoon, a local bar on London's West End, at the scheduled time. Ilford in London is a vibrant and culturally diverse neighborhood ideal for evening meals and socializing. One Saturday evening, Zara and her friend came to this area. They then headed to another bar, where Zara had a couple of glasses of water. Meanwhile, Jordan was at a nearby nightclub, having one drink after another. As he drank, an idea formed in his mind, and he decided to act on it. He was determined to find a woman to attack that night. Security cameras captured Jordan's behavior at the club's entrance, where he would hug and try to kiss women without their consent. He was particularly aggressive with one employee, despite her clear discomfort. Eventually, he was kicked out of the club around 11 p.m., and his behavior was recorded on camera. After leaving the club, cameras continued to capture Jordan's actions as he walked down Romford Street towards the park. As Jordan walked, he spotted a woman and began to follow her. Jordan approached her, and she tried to avoid him by entering a store. However, Jordan waited for her outside, and when she left the store, he followed her again. He then crossed the street, keeping her in sight. When the woman entered her house, Jordan was forced to continue on his way. According to security footage, around 2 a.m. on Cranbrook Street, Jordan noticed another woman approaching him. Suddenly, Jordan quickened his pace, approaching a woman. However, two passing witnesses noticed his suspicious behavior, which was captured on video. Despite this, the woman managed to return home safely, leaving Jordan surprised and frustrated. He then returned to Cranbrook Street, having been unsuccessful. Around the same time, Zara and her friend decided to leave the bar and head home. It was 2 a.m. Her friend took a taxi, but Zara chose to walk, given the short distance and pleasant weather. As they parted ways, Zara began walking down Cranbrook Street, a residential area just a 10-minute walk from her house. It was then that Jordan spotted her. According to Chief Inspector Dave Williams, Jordan had a clear intention that night, to attack a woman, regardless of the location. Cranbrook Street remained busy, even in the early hours, with a steady flow of traffic. Jordan had a history of offenses dating back to 2006 to 2009, for which he was sentenced in a Kent juvenile court at the age of 13. In August 2010, at the age of 17, he was found guilty of assaulting a girl, causing her to suffer a swollen eye. He received a 4-month detention and correction period as a result. 11 years after his initial offense, Jordan committed another crime against a woman, resulting in a 3-year ban from approaching her, either directly or indirectly. By 2010, he had a total of 28 convictions for 69 different offenses. These offenses included theft, assault on both police officers and the general public, motor vehicle theft, traffic infractions, committing crimes while out on bail, and shoplifting. Jordan used a social media platform to boast about his extensive collection of weapons and glorify a life of crime. He shared various photos and quotes, as well as fake images claiming the FBI was searching for him. After being imprisoned for crimes including criminal damage, racially aggravated harassment, and carrying a bladed weapon, Jordan was released on parole on June 17, 2022. One of the conditions of his parole was to regularly meet with his assigned parole officer. Following his release, Jordan resided in a van on St. Valentine Street, located in a 130-acre park in the Gun Hill area of London's Redbridge district, the largest green space in the region. Jordan broke all the rules of his parole and missed 2 scheduled meetings with his parole officer. As a result, the authorities decided not to show him any mercy. On June 22, 2022, the parole service started the process to send Jordan back to prison, but they didn't notify the police until 2 days later. On the morning of Saturday, June 25, 2022, police went to his mother's house to arrest him, only to find he was not there. In the early hours of June 26, 2022, a horrific crime occurred in Ilford. Zara was discovered on the sidewalk, displaying signs of abuse, with her belongings scattered around her. Her body showed evidence of severe injuries, her clothes were torn, and her eyes indicated a desperate struggle for survival. A passerby immediately recognized the gravity of the situation and began administering chest compressions and CPR in an attempt to save Zara's life. Despite the efforts of passers-by and emergency medical responders, Zara's injuries proved too severe. She fought for her life but ultimately passing away at 9:58 a.m. on Sunday. At approximately 11 a.m., security cameras in the park captured Jordan disposing of evidence, including his clothes, with an air of indifference and calmness. This behavior suggested that the act of violence was premeditated rather than random. The police swiftly responded and visited Zara's grandmother, asking her to identify her granddaughter from video footage taken at the bar. Upon confirmation of Zara's identity, the police informed her grandmother about the incident. Zara's uncle Kasim then contacted other family members, including Aunt Farah in Portugal, to break the news. Farah recalled receiving the distressing call on Saturday night, which prompted her to immediately travel to London. The family was deeply shocked and struggling to cope with the intense sadness of Zara's passing. Concurrently, detectives initiated an investigation in the area where Zara's body was found. They began by gathering footage from surveillance cameras to reconstruct the attacker's movements. The combination of video evidence and bloody fingerprints discovered near the crime scene enabled the identification of Jordan as the primary suspect. Utilizing a video surveillance system, the police tracked Jordan's location and obtained images of him. Inspector Dave dispatched an officer to Gun Hill to verify if anyone recognized Jordan. The operation yielded swift results, as Jordan was found sleeping in his van shortly thereafter. The authorities immediately arrested Jordan, who was found with blood-stained clothes and shoes that he was trying to dispose of. Despite lengthy interrogations, he refused to speak or reveal any information about himself. Meanwhile, new video footage emerged, allowing police to piece together the incident surrounding the crime. The incident led parole officer Justin Russell to criticize the handling of Jordan's case, highlighting a series of errors. Jordan has a criminal history dating back to the age of 16 and has been in prison several times, making him a subject at high risk of committing a crime. After being released from detention, he missed several scheduled supervision appointments. Authorities failed to take prompt action to return him to prison. Zara's family described the last few days as incredibly shocking, acknowledging that their loss was irreparable. However, in the face of such grief, they were touched by the warmth and kindness people have shown. The family faced a significant amount of work and needed to find the strength to cope. Aunt Farah took charge of communicating with the media and meeting with the police. Even though they were dealing with their own shock and grief, the family understood that taking control of the situation was crucial to protect Zara from possible accusations by some media outlets. A preliminary hearing for the Jordan case occurred on July 1, 2022. A subsequent hearing was scheduled for September 30, 2022, to prepare testimonies for the trial. However, the trial was postponed because Jordan did not appear on the scheduled day. On July 2, a memorial service was held for Zara, organized by her family. The service took place along the route Zara would have taken home, representing her final, unfinished journey. Many attendees wore white to symbolize a silent walk. Over 120 organizations that specialize in supporting women attended, showing solidarity in the fight against violence. These organizations collaborated with Zara Alena's family and publicly pushed for justice and accountability. They stressed that it's crucial to address violence against women and stopping perpetrators from committing such acts. During a preliminary hearing at East London Court in Walthamstow, crime scene investigator Nadia Persat testified. She stated that local police officers could have done more to locate Jordan before he attacked Zara. Persat believes the jury should investigate this matter further. On November 16, 2022, Jordan failed to appear at the hearing, despite being informed that his attendance was mandatory. As a result, a video call was arranged, during which he pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow argued that Jordan would be unfit for bail, and Judge Chima Grave agreed. The judge postponed the verdict until December 14th of the same year. However, as that date approached, Jordan failed to appear in court. Despite his absence, Jordan was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years for the murder of Zara Alena. Jordan and his representatives appealed the sentence, which was subsequently reduced to 33 years in prison. The judge took into account that Zara was unconscious at the time of her death and therefore did not experience any suffering, which was a key factor in the decision to reduce the sentence. For months after the incident, it was revealed that Jordan had a personal relationship with a 32-year-old woman who worked at the Belmarsh Correctional Facility in South London. The woman, who was not a direct employee of the prison services but worked at the facility, was arrested and investigated for suspected misconduct in a public office. Zara Alena's family still fondly remembers her with love and pride. Her aunt, Farah, continues to advocate against violence towards women and girls. In March 2023, Farah participated in a march organized by various groups to raise awareness about the issue. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Emmett Corrigan. Ashley Harmon was a vibrant and intelligent individual. However, her parents' divorce when she was 9 years old marked the beginning of a challenging period in her life. During this time, Ashley took on a maternal role, caring for and protecting her 5 siblings. Faith is the foundation of her life. As a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Ashley found strength and comfort in her relationship with God. Whenever she faced adversity, her faith provided her with the resilience to persevere. Ashley's unwavering commitment to her faith gave her the courage to overcome obstacles and difficult situations head-on. In 2003, while studying human development at Utah State, Ashley met Emmett Corrigan, a philosophy student. Emmett, like Ashley, had experienced the pain of parental separation, having gone through a similar experience at the age of 10. He, too, found solace in the Mormon faith. Emmett was 17 years old when he was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, surrounded by his loved ones. Around that time, Ashley caught his eye, and he was immediately drawn to her intelligence. Emmett confided in his close friends that he was certain Ashley was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. As their relationship blossomed, Emmett proposed to Ashley during the 2008 Christmas season, just a few months after they met. Overjoyed, Ashley said yes, and they began making wedding plans. The couple exchanged vows in a Mormon temple, a ceremony that reflected their shared values. Their marriage brought joy and stability to their lives. In the Mormon faith, marriage is deeply revered as a sacred and eternal bond between two people. Mormons believe that this bond transcends mortality, continuing even after death. Divorce is discouraged but allowed in exceptional cases. In 2005, Ashley and Emmett welcomed twin daughters, marking the beginning of their parenthood journey. They were ecstatic to take on their new roles. Emmett cherished every moment spent with the girls, embracing fatherhood. Ashley was thrilled to be living her dream life. While attending Utah State University, the couple managed to balance childcare and educational responsibilities. Despite challenges, their faith and love helped them overcome obstacles. They persevered, striving for a better future. By 2009, Emmett graduated with high honors, then attended law school and passed the bar exam. He pursued a career as an attorney. Meanwhile, Ashley focused on raising their growing family, dedicating herself to household management and childcare for their 4 children. The Corrigan family appeared to have a perfect life to outsiders. They resided in a lovely home with multiple children, and Emmett had a rewarding career. However, their situation wasn't as ideal as it seemed. By August 2010, Emmett felt increasingly pressured to support his family financially, particularly with 4 young children under the age of 5. To solve this problem, he decided to start his own business, focusing on working as a criminal defense lawyer. A friend introduced Emmett to Candy Hall, a well-regarded paralegal with experience working for a criminal attorney. After a successful lunch meeting, Emmett hired Candy to work at his firm. At the time, Candy was married to Robert Hall, who was widely regarded as a devoted father and diligent worker. When Candy started working for Emmett Corrigan, she was initially excited, and her family was happy for her. However, as time passed, Emmett's wife, Ashley, began to notice that their marriage was changing. Emmett was under a lot of stress. To cope with the stress, Emmett started spending more time at the gym, which became an addiction for him. He went to the gym regularly, leaving Ashley alone to take care of the children. Despite the growing distance between them, Ashley and Emmett welcomed their fifth child, a son, on January 15, 2011. However, Emmett's behavior changed even more after the birth of their son. He began spending more time away from home, sometimes staying out overnight. Ashley became concerned about Emmett's activities and confided in her sister that she feared he might be cheating on her. Meanwhile, Candy, Emmett's assistant, was also experiencing problems in her marriage. Her husband, Robert, was jealous of her working for a young and charismatic man like Emmett, which led to constant fighting and took a toll on their marriage. On March 6, 2011, Ashley and Emmett's 7th wedding anniversary had arrived, but Emmett was absent, claiming he had to attend a bodybuilding convention. Ashley was left alone with the children, feeling anxious about their marriage. She wondered if she was to blame for Emmett's unhappiness. Determined to improve things, she pushed on, as divorce wasn't an option. Ashley chose to address the issue directly. A few days later, on March 11th, she spent the entire day planning the perfect evening to reconnect with Emmett. She prepared his favorite meal, cleaned the house, and made sure the children behaved. At 6 p.m., Ashley had the table set, ready to greet him warmly. However, Emmett didn't arrive until 2 hours later. When Ashley approached him with a kiss, he turned away, further straining their relationship. Despite Emmett's cold demeanor and the growing distance between them, Ashley remained determined to rekindle their love. She believed their relationship was worth fighting for and was willing to do whatever it took to repair it. The family gathered around the table to eat. However, Emmett claimed he wasn't hungry, which was disappointing and hurtful to Ashley. As the rest of the family enjoyed their dinner, Emmett got up, saying he needed to go to Walgreens, but Ashley sensed something was wrong and asked him to stay. Emmett responded harshly and left, leaving Ashley feeling confused and hurt. Meanwhile, Emmett's assistant, Candy, was dealing with her own marital problems. Her husband, Robert, had decided to leave their home after their marriage reached a breaking point. Despite their love for each other, Robert believed it was best to start fresh and move on. That evening, Robert phoned his daughter to check if she was using Candy's car. She told him she isn't. A few minutes later, while driving past Walgreens, she spotted her mother's car in the parking lot. She didn't think much of it and immediately called her father to let him know. Robert responded casually with, "Oh, okay." Unbeknownst to them, this ordinary-sounding conversation would have a profound impact on two families' lives forever. Ashley lay in bed, overcome with worry about her marriage. Despite her frantic texts and calls, Emmett remained unreachable. A nagging feeling in her gut left her uneasy. Around 1 p.m., a 911 call reported gunshots and a screaming woman in a Walgreens parking lot, prompting a swift police response. Upon arrival, the first officer was met with a disturbing scene, a lifeless man on the ground and a wounded person clutching their head in pain. Police sought to speak with Candy Hall, who was present at the scene. She identified the wounded person as her husband, Robert, and the deceased as her boss, Emmett. Emmett had suffered fatal gunshot wounds to the head and chest. Shortly after his body was discovered, Ashley was awakened by a knock on the door from the police. Ashley was stunned and inconsolable, unable to comprehend the events that led to this tragedy. After the police informed Ashley of her husband's death, a detective inquired if she was familiar with Robert and Candy Hall. Ashley stated that she knew Candy as Emmett's assistant but suspected an affair between Candy and Emmett. The police took Candy Hall from the Walgreens parking lot for questioning to piece together the events leading to Emmett's death and Robert's head injury. During the interrogation, detectives asked Candy if she had a romantic relationship with her boss, Emmett. She denied it, also refuting any intimate encounters between them. Candy claimed she went to Walgreens that night to collect a prescription and coincidentally met Emmett. After that, she and Emmett decided to take a drive. While driving to a gas station, Candy received a call from her estranged husband, Robert. She told him she was with Emmett, which led to Robert expressing jealousy and making a threat against Emmett. Candy and Emmett arrived at Walgreens after what felt like an eternity. As they stepped out of the car, Candy saw Robert standing at the entrance. He looked visibly angry. An intense argument broke out between Robert and Emmett, leading to a physical fight. Then, 3 shots were fired, and both men fell to the ground. Candy saw the gun, picked it up, and threw it aside. When questioned by detectives, Candy claimed she didn't know who fired first. After Robert received treatment for his superficial gunshot wound, detectives interviewed him. They told Robert they found a gun at the scene and asked him who it belonged to. Robert admitted the gun was his and explained that it fell from his pocket during the fight with Emmett in the parking lot. Robert alleged that Emmett dove for the gun, triggering a struggle, and Emmett shot him in the head. However, Robert couldn't recall who shot Emmett during the struggle. Given Robert's head wound, detectives weren't surprised by his hazy memory. Nevertheless, they wondered if Emmett was indeed the one who fired first, considering he was the one who ended up dead. To investigate the shooting in the Walgreens parking lot, detectives reviewed the security footage. At 9:55 p.m., Robert Hall arrived in the parking lot. A minute later, he entered the Walgreens store and quickly moved through each aisle, appearing to look for someone. He left the store at 10:06 p.m. and parked his car next to Candy's, waiting there for a few minutes. About 10 minutes later, Emmett's truck entered the parking lot. However, the actual shooting was not captured on camera. Candy, Emmett's assistant, initially denied being in a romantic relationship with Emmett. However, their co-workers suspected otherwise. Co-workers reported seeing Candy and Emmett spending a lot of time together in Emmett's office with the door closed. 3 weeks after Candy was hired, on the day Emmett was shot, detectives discovered that Emmett had accompanied Candy to the public defender's office to discuss her divorce from Robert. During the investigation into Emmett's murder, crime scene investigators searched Emmett's vehicle and found steroids in the glove compartment. This discovery didn't surprise Emmett's loved ones. When Candy gave her statement, she described a shot cadence that led detectives to believe Robert shot Emmett twice before shooting himself in the head. Based on this evidence, detectives obtained an arrest warrant for Robert Hall, charging him with first-degree murder. Robert Hall was arrested and charged with Emmett's murder. The consequences of Robert Hall's actions were severe, with a possible conviction of first-degree murder carrying a sentence of either life in prison without parole or the death penalty. Prosecutors argued that Robert Hall was driven by anger towards Emmett, who had been having an affair with Robert's wife, Candy. They alleged that this anger led Robert to shoot Emmett and then attempt to take his own life. In contrast, Robert's defense team presented a different scenario. They claimed that Emmett, who had a history of steroid abuse, was the aggressor on the night of his death. According to the defense, Emmett managed to get hold of Robert's gun during the altercation and shot Robert first. Robert then regained control of the gun and killed Emmett in self-defense. Candy Hall, Robert's wife, was a key witness in the trial. her testimony differed slightly from her initial statement to the police. On the witness stand, Candy described hearing a single pop, followed by 2 rapid pops, rather than the initial 2 shots and then a third. This revised testimony supported the defense's argument that Emmett had shot Robert first, and that Robert had then shot Emmett twice, resulting in his death. To prove that Robert was the shooter in the Walgreens parking lot, prosecutors presented forensic evidence about the type of weapon used. This evidence showed that the weapon accumulates a large amount of gunshot residue, GSR, after being fired. After the shooting, investigators tested Robert and Emmett for gunshot residue. The test found 32 gunshot residue particles on Robert's left palm and 23 on his right. In contrast, Emmett had only 1 particle on his left hand and none on his right. These results strongly suggested that Robert fired the gun, not Emmett. After a thorough review, the jury delivered a verdict of not guilty of first-degree murder for Robert Hull. However, they unanimously agreed that he was guilty of second-degree murder, indicating that the murder was not premeditated. As a result, Robert was sentenced to 30 years in prison by the presiding judge. He will be eligible for parole in 2028 at the age of 58. Despite being convicted, Robert has consistently maintained his innocence and appealed the verdict. In 2021, the Idaho Supreme Court reaffirmed his conviction, denying his request for a retrial. Ashley struggled to cope with the fact that her husband, Emmett, was murdered by the husband of his lover, Candy Hull. In a 2015 Dr. Phil interview, Ashley met Candy face-to-face for the first time. Despite the emotional pain, Ashley was determined to move forward. She closed the book on her old life and started anew by moving out of the town where she and Emmett raised their 5 children. As time passed, the children adjusted to the change and started to find happiness again. Ashley eventually remarried and had 2 more children. She currently blogs to support trauma victims. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson was 23 years old in 2012, and her life was a challenge. She had recently separated from her husband, Wayne, and they were in the process of getting a divorce. They had 2 young children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr. Despite the difficulties they faced as parents, Heather was determined to provide a happy life for her kids. She had found a new home on a quiet street near Lake Erie, which brought her some sense of relief. Heather and Wayne had been high school sweethearts, but their marriage had fallen apart. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle Sorrell arrived at her house at 2:30 p.m. for a prearranged meeting. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked, leaving her wondering what was going on. Danielle was puzzled that Heather and her kids weren't at home despite their planned meeting. Even if Heather had changed her plans, she would have alerted Danielle. So, Danielle called Heather's mom, Jody, who was very close to her daughter and spoke with her daily. However, Jody couldn't reach Heather that day either. Danielle then contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Her concern grew when she spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch. Danielle knew Heather would never leave the house without the pacifier, so something was off. Hours passed, but Heather still hadn't contacted her mom. Jody's unease called the police to request a check. The officers arrived, knocked on the door, and got no response. They circled the house, peeking through the windows, but saw nothing suspicious. Since they found no signs of forced entry or foul play, they couldn't enter the house without a warrant and left. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Heather's friends, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, arrived at her house after discovering she was missing. When no one answered the front door, Reiner proceeded to the back porch, forced the door open, and entered the home. Inside, they found Heather's naked body in the bedroom and immediately called 911. Sergeant Eric Graybill, a Sandusky police officer, responded to the scene and entered the house. He discovered Heather's body lodged between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature around her neck. The TV was still on, but the children were nowhere to be found. Their room was empty. During their search of the house, the officers noticed a utility closet door that they had not yet checked. When Sergeant Bill opened the door, he found stacked boxes with objects behind them. Behind the boxes, he discovered the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately secured the crime scene. The officers were deeply shaken by the discovery, having never encountered a crime of such magnitude before. Heather's family and friends were even more devastated after the forensic examination results were revealed. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed the autopsies on the 3 victims. Her findings showed that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation. Additionally, Dr. Barnett observed that Heather's rectum was unusually open after death, suggesting that an object was likely inserted into the area around the time of her death, causing it to remain in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett testified that both Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson also died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear was rolled up, indicating that the body had been redressed. Selena also had a rectal dilation similar to her mother's, again indicating that something was in her rectum at or about the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, testified that there was seminal fluid on the anal swabs obtained from Selena Jackson. Cox also noticed a stain in Selena Jackson's underwear, so she cut a small portion of that stained area for testing and determined that it contained a sperm cell. The police were determined to quickly catch the monster responsible for the crime. Since Heather's house was located next to Firelands Regional Medical Center, investigators obtained footage from the building's surveillance cameras, which they hoped would lead them to the perpetrator. Reviewing the CCTV footage, they identified a car that drove up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. Although the camera was far from the house and the darkness made it difficult to see, the car's headlights provided some clues about what happened. The footage showed the car backing into the driveway and remaining there for 11 minutes. At 11:08 p.m., the headlights turned on again, and the driver departed. Meanwhile, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the men who discovered Heather's body, were brought to the police station for questioning. The investigators questioned them separately, starting with Dan Reiner, who had called 911. Dan and Heather were friends, and when Dan discovered she was missing, he went to her house to look for her. He had to push the door hard to get in. After calling 911, the police asked Dan for a DNA sample, which he willingly provided. The results are nothing special, and he was released. The police then questioned Thomas Hansen, who claimed to have spoken with Heather on the phone the previous night. He said he drove to her house around 11 p.m. but didn't go inside. Instead, they chatted briefly outside, and then he left. This revelation helped the police identify the driver of the car seen on CCTV footage, Thomas Hansen. Hansen also revealed that he didn't enter Heather's house because she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone Hansen knew as Josh. Hansen's account matched Reiner's, stating that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to investigate. After releasing the initial suspect, the police shifted their focus to a new suspect, Josh Case, who was at Heather's house on the night of her death. They quickly located him and brought him in for questioning. Josh admitted to knowing Heather for years and being at her house that evening, where they watched TV while the children slept. He also claimed to have gone to the store to buy breakfast for the kids, returning to the house before a friend picked him up at around 1 a.m. Josh acknowledged having consensual intimate contact with Heather. Investigators verified his alibi by reviewing the store's CCTV footage, which confirmed he entered the store at 11:20 p.m. While this corroboration supported his testimony, it did not rule out the possibility that Josh might still be involved in Heather's tragic death. Heather's last known contact was with Josh's case, making him the prime suspect. He provided a DNA sample, which was compared to the DNA found on the victims' bodies. The results eliminated Thomas Henson and Dan Reiner as suspects, as their DNA did not match. However, Josh's DNA matched the DNA on Heather's body, but not on her children's bodies, indicating another person was present that night. This was not surprising, as Josh had previously admitted to an intimate relationship with Heather. The police now focused on finding the DNA of the second person involved. They quickly ruled out Heather's husband, Wayne, who was going through a divorce with Heather and lived in another state. The investigators turned to Heather's cell phone records for answers. The records showed Heather was active on her phone, including on the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police's next step was to identify the owner of the phone number Heather last spoke to. 36 hours after Heather's death, police obtained another CCTV footage that showed a white car arriving at her house around 3 a.m. This timing coincided with when Heather stopped using her phone, suggesting a possible connection. The car left about an hour later, by which time Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage was not clear enough to reveal the license plate, investigators identified the car as a Cadillac. Further investigation led police to the owner of the phone number Heather had called before her death. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton, who had a 30-second conversation with Heather at 3:12 a.m. A background check on Clinton revealed a disturbing history. He had been released from prison in February after serving 13 years for 2 counts of felonious assault and manslaughter. Clinton had pleaded guilty to the 1997 death of 18-year-old Misty Keckler, who was found strangled, naked, and bound in a bathtub. The similarities between Keckler's death and Heather's raised concerns among investigators, especially given that Clinton had been released from prison just 6 months before Heather and her children's deaths. This raised the possibility that Clinton had returned to his violent ways after his release. Curtis Clinton became the prime suspect in the murder of Heather and her children, and the police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. The police visited Clinton's last known address but were unable to find him. However, they soon discovered a white Cadillac parked on a nearby street. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station, dated the night of the crime. The investigators reviewed the gas station's CCTV footage, which showed Clinton purchasing water and beer while appearing calm. This was after the time Heather and her children were killed. The police were received information that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They immediately went to the hospital, found Clinton, and arrested him, taking him into custody at the police station. Clinton denied any involvement in the deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. He admitted to having dated Heather for 5 months and having an intimate relationship with her. According to Clinton, Heather had many personal problems and had asked him for financial and emotional support. He claimed that he didn't know her children well. Clinton initially stated that he last saw Heather on Thursday, September 6th, when he gave her $328 and they had intimate contact. However, when the investigator showed him phone records indicating that he had spoken with Heather at 3:12 a.m. on September 8th, Clinton corrected himself, saying that it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw her. Clinton claimed that he didn't stay long at Heather's house, dropping off the money and then leaving after their intimate encounter. He couldn't recall what time he arrived home. Clinton suggested that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left, as Heather had mentioned receiving an irritating call or text while he was with her. When confronted with the fact that he was the last person to have contact with Heather, Clinton expressed doubt. Curtis Clinton was arrested and jailed after his DNA was found on the victims. In a recorded call to his mother, Clinton expressed regret and confusion, saying he wished he'd sought help. He also hinted at a violent temper, suggesting it could happen again. His mother acknowledged the family's struggles, but said they'd learned to manage them, and noted that Clinton had stopped taking his medication, which contributed to his behavior. Clinton told his mother that he planned to plead guilty to the charges and accept whatever consequences came his way. The investigation led to multiple charges against Clinton. Furthermore, it was discovered that just 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children, Clinton had attacked a 17-year-old girl, choking her and forcing her to engage in intimate contact. The victim had gone to the hospital, where police collected DNA evidence that also linked Clinton to the crime. Clinton asked to move the trial to a different location, claiming that the local media had already publicized the case so much that it would be hard to find impartial jurors. However, the court denied this request. Clinton brutally murdered Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and the forensic evidence, including his DNA found inside Selena's body, revealed the horrific details of his crimes. Despite facing the death penalty, Clinton did everything he could to avoid it. When given the opportunity to speak before being sentenced, he did not show remorse or apologize to the victims' families. Instead, he attacked prosecutor Kevin Baxter and vowed to win on appeal and have his case retried. In November 2013, Clinton was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for what he did to 3-year-old Selena before strangling her, and added another 10 years for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before killing Heather and her children. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Roxanne Valdez. Roxanne Valdez was born in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile, in 1957. Roxana Valdez was married to a man whose name remains undisclosed or unknown to the press. She had a son with him. It's clear that her marriage wasn't the dream every girl hopes for, as the couple eventually parted ways in 2011. As a single mother in a small village where jobs were scarce, Roxana faced significant challenges. In such communities, the primary occupation was growing and selling fruits and vegetables, and even the local educational institutions focused on agriculture. It was in this setting that Roxana found employment at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. She worked as a night supervisor at the school, ensuring that students slept at night and didn't engage in unruly activities. Her responsibilities didn't include the actual upbringing of the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school where she worked. As a single mother, she spent her days working in the fields, leaving her little time to devote to her son. At the school, Claudio Munoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His night shifts often brought him into contact with Roxana, despite their 14-year age difference. They discovered common interests and bonded over their personal struggles. Roxana shared stories about the school and her failed marriage, while Claudio confided in her about his unhappy relationship with his wife and his adoration for his 2 daughters. Though he felt disconnected from his wife and had considered divorce, he remained in the marriage to honor a promise to his late father-in-law. Over time, Claudio's priorities shifted, and he began spending more time with Roxana, eventually leaving his family without explanation. Roxana welcomed him into her life, and their relationship accelerated rapidly. However, in her haste, she overlooked the fact that Claudio was temperamental and sometimes cruel, as well as the needs of her own children, who required constant attention. On a scheduled community cleanup day at the boarding school, Claudio's first serious outburst of aggression occurred. Students were assigned different areas to clean and were given the necessary supplies, including brooms, buckets, dustpans, and rags. However, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio, who was in charge of cleanliness but lacked teaching experience. In the absence of teachers, he threatened to physically harm any student who didn't clean. Although it's unclear if he would have carried out this threat, the students eventually began cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of violence, which displeased the principal. As a result, the principal asked Claudio to resign voluntarily. It's worth noting that the Don Gregorio boarding school was almost the only place in the area that offered stable and reasonably paid employment. Claudio initially spent some time searching for work in fields and at fruit stalls, but when his efforts proved unsuccessful, he and Roxanna decided to seek a better life elsewhere. They left her son at the boarding school to continue his education, as they deemed it too risky to take him with them, fearing they would become too dependent on employers. Having already had a bad experience, the couple decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They relocated to the commune of Molina, a couple of hours' drive from the Chilean capital, which is renowned for its vineyards that produce well-known wine brands exported globally. Roxanna and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and took their first steps in their small family business. Claudio was responsible for purchasing and transporting products from suppliers to the kiosk, while Roxanna handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as this would have meant additional expenses. And they were also concerned that an employee might not closely monitor the perishable goods, leading to further losses. Claudio was visibly upset and even angry when he found out that Roxanna was pregnant with their first child together. He needed time to reflect on this, but Roxanna, blinded by her new relationship and their thriving business, didn't disagree with his point of view. She agreed that after the child was born, they would give it to her relatives to raise. However, it turned out that there was no child to give away. Since then, Claudio's behavior changed drastically. He frequently yelled at his wife and occasionally resorted to physical violence. The neighbors, unhappy with the noisy disputes, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene and calm the domestic disputes. On one occasion, the police responded to a distress call to find Roxanna in a distraught state, crying and partially undressed, as she fled her home with Claudio chasing after her. When the officers arrived, Roxanna broke down and confided in them, revealing that she had been a victim of ongoing domestic abuse, which had even led to her suffering a miscarriage. This traumatic experience had left her requiring psychological help. Nevertheless, as time passed, the couple appeared to put the incident behind them, and they resumed their life together as if the ordeal had never occurred. Despite the incident warranting criminal charges, Roxanna showed compassion and gave Claudio a second chance, extracting a promise that it was an isolated incident. Claudio vowed to never again exhibit such behavior, but his history of abuse with his ex-wife cast doubt on his reliability. Sadly, the pattern of abuse persisted, and history repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxanna, but started going out at night to drink excessively in local bars. He would spend a significant portion of their family's income not only on alcohol, but also on relationships with disreputable women. Roxanna tolerated her husband's behavior, hoping that he would change once they had a child together. Her hope was partially fulfilled. In 2013, Roxanna gave birth to a healthy child, and Claudio ended his partying lifestyle, diverting his attention to their business, which required expansion. They acquired another kiosk in a nearby area and an additional vehicle for transporting products. Roxanna also invested in firearms for protection, as their work and living environments were not very safe. The family's wealth grew substantially, but it was only on paper. Despite this, Claudio went back to his old habits, wasting money on drinking and once again resorting to violence against Roxanna at home. According to Roxanna's testimony, the abuse she suffered at Claudio's hands continually worsened over time. At first, Claudio only drank occasionally, but he soon began to do so more and more frequently. When he came home drunk, he would accuse Roxanna of being unfaithful, even though she was innocent, and this would lead to physical and sexual abuse, even when she was pregnant. Claudio's actions seemed intentionally designed to cause harm, and they ultimately led to Roxanna having a miscarriage in August 2012, which sent her into a deep and prolonged depression. Claudio followed his usual routine by visiting a local bar one night, staying out until the next morning. Roxanna, accustomed to his behavior, still worried about him. However, it turned out that Claudio had stolen 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, from their daughter's room. The money, earned from selling Roxanna's mother's house, was intended for their joint business venture. Roxanna was shocked and felt betrayed by Claudio's actions, which he used to fund his excessive drinking and brothel visits. When Claudio finally returned home late that evening, Roxanna confronted him about the missing money. Instead of discussing the issue, Claudio assaulted her and confessed to squandering the entire amount. This was the final straw for Roxanna, who, without hesitation, went to their bedroom, retrieved a .38 caliber revolver intended for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest at close range. The shot proved fatal, and Claudio died instantly. Roxanna was taken aback by her own drastic actions and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. Her desperate act marked a tragic end to the ongoing turmoil in their domestic life. In her testimony, Roxanna expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that her intention was to kill Claudio, not intimidate him, citing the numerous instances of abuse and assault she had suffered at his hands. Roxanna regretted not reporting these incidents to the authorities or withdrawing her complaint out of fear, even before they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxanna's primary concern was the potential impact on their young daughter, particularly if she were imprisoned and the child were sent to an institution. That night, Roxanna decided the best course of action would be to dispose of the body and report Claudio missing. Aware that his frequent drinking binges that often led to his disappearance were well known to the police. Roxanna found disposing of the body a daunting task. She decided to dismember it piece by piece, initially using 5 kitchen knives intended for meat cutting to sever the limbs and head as they kept dulling. She then boiled the dismembered parts in her largest pots, all while interacting with her young daughter, who remained oblivious to her mother's actions and her father's fate. The following day, Roxanna packed the cooled body parts into plastic containers, organizing them separately: hands, legs, head, and torso. Each container was then placed in a separate garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia, intending to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she thoroughly cleaned her house with bleach. However, upon arriving at the designated site, Roxanna couldn't muster the courage to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. In her testimony, Roxanna expressed her internal conflict, stating that it was strange she had the bravery to commit the heinous crime and dismember a human body as if it were an animal. But she couldn't bring herself to dispose of the evidence. She mentioned being nervous throughout the drive, feeling constantly watched, fearing the police would stop and search her car at any moment. This fear led to panic, even though she had a backup plan involving her daughter, pretending to rush her to the hospital if stopped. She even thought of how to make her cry louder by pinching her. Roxanna was unable to get rid of the remains, so she took them back home and hid them in the garage. She then thoroughly cleaned the interior of her car with bleach. Next, she visited Claudio's relatives, telling them that he had stolen a large amount of money and had been absent for days. They didn't seem to care, simply shrugging in response. After that, Roxanna visited her mother and brother. Her mother was extremely concerned about Roxanna's behavior, noticing that she hadn't eaten, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions over and over. The only question Roxanna answered quickly was when her mother asked about Claudio's whereabouts, saying that he had gone to buy supplies for their store, but had gotten a flat tire and was delayed getting back home. Alone with her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxanna broke down and called her brother for help. When he arrived, she confessed everything, sharing the nightmarish years she endured with Claudio, and showed him the containers holding the body. Her brother was shocked, but instead of offering help, he refused, fearing police involvement and the possibility of being charged as an accomplice. He urged Roxanna to confess to the Carabineros, insisting he would do it if she didn't. Disappointed but realizing she had no other choice, Roxanna decided to take his advice. That night, she went to the 4th police station, announcing her intention to make an important statement. The officers, familiar with her husband's troublesome behavior, initially thought she wanted to report him again. However, they were shocked by her confession. Roxanna was immediately arrested, and the news spread rapidly throughout the area, attracting a swarm of journalists around the station. The case against Roxanna seemed clear-cut. She had confessed to the crime, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. However, prosecutor Monica Besis was not convinced. She was skeptical about the ease with which Roxanna had confessed and wanted to investigate further. Besis requested an extension of Roxanna's arrest to conduct a forensic examination, hoping to prove that her victim, Claudio, was still alive when she dismembered him. This would have significantly increased Roxanna's sentence. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention for further investigation. Meanwhile, Roxanna's defense attorney, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxanna had acted while under extreme emotional distress, possibly exacerbated by postpartum depression and chronic domestic abuse. She pointed out that Roxanna's cooperation and voluntary confession should be considered mitigating factors. However, the prosecution's theory that Claudio was alive during the dismemberment was later disproven by forensic results, which confirmed that Claudio had died from a gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet from the .38 caliber revolver had caused a heart rupture and damaged vital organs. Following these developments, the aggravating circumstances were dismissed. In a separate development, lawyer Juan Pablo Cardenas, who was seeking to make a name for himself in this high-profile case, noted that the firearm used in the murder was legally registered. He also pointed out that Roxanna's first report of domestic violence to the police was filed just 20 days after the couple started living together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela submitted documents to the court after a medical examination stating that Roxanna was extremely mentally unstable at the time of the crime. According to his findings, she lacked full awareness of her actions and suffered from emotional instability, which was linked to the recent loss of 2 children, one in August 2012 and another just 3 weeks before the crime. Prosecutors' forensic exam showed Claudio's blood alcohol level was 3 Gr/L at death on April 17, 2015. After a year of investigation, Roxanna's trial began. The media dubbed it the Molina Cooks case and sensationalized it, claiming Roxanna ate part of the remains to attract attention. Distressed, Roxanna refused to make statements during the trial. The prosecutors attempted to sway the judge's opinion by highlighting that, according to Chilean law, Roxanna had committed a serious offense, the murder of her own father, patricide, although they failed to provide evidence that the crime was premeditated. In contrast, the defense attorney countered that his client had acted in self-defense, protecting herself from a violent aggressor who had subjected her to years of abuse and mistreatment. The trial, which lasted several weeks, was closely followed by the entire population of Chile. Prosecutor Monica requested a 15-year prison sentence for Roxanna, but after careful consideration of the defense and the jury's opinion, the judges sentenced her to 6 years in a correctional facility with a lenient regime. Claudio's relatives, who had been hoping for a life sentence or even the death penalty, were outraged when they heard the prosecutor's request for only 15 years. They were devastated by the court's decision and rejected any suggestion of violence within the family. They argued that Claudio, a successful businessman, could not have stolen $6,000 from Roxanna, and claimed that he had confessed to them that Roxanna had often threatened to kill him, having previously taken out a revolver from the closet and warned him of her intentions. Claudio's sister blamed Chile's system of justice, claiming it to be corrupt as evidenced by the short sentences given to brutal criminals, similar to those for minor robberies. Claudio's first wife, Giselle, defended him, asserting that he was not violent, based on her experience of living with him for many years without incident. In contrast, Roxanna was prone to jealous outbursts and possessiveness, often sparking disputes. Roxanna's sentence was shortened due to good behavior, and she was transferred to a semi-open education center, where she was allowed to communicate with her daughter. Eventually, she was released early, sparking widespread outrage among the public, who felt that the cook from Molina was let off lightly. However, some people saw Roxanna as a victim and justified her actions, despite considering her a murderer. This case continues to be debated in the country, highlighting the severe consequences of unchecked domestic violence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in the city of Allamont Springs, Florida. She had an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father worked as a construction worker, often traveling to other states for several days, leaving the kids alone with their mother. Jessica was a cheerful and lovely child. She liked to spend a lot of time outdoors with friends, play with her siblings, and she also had a deep love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That day, her father went to the store to buy some items for the holiday, while her mother stayed in their apartment, packing for the upcoming trip. Jessica returned home from school with other children and asked her mother if she could go to the yard. She wanted to wait for her father, who was expected to return from the store soon. Her mother agreed and told her daughter not to go anywhere else. Their apartment complex was situated away from the main road, surrounded by trees, and the mother felt relatively secure about Jessica's safety. All the neighborhood children, including Jessica, always played there without constant adult supervision, and everything had been fine. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., her father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised, as her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he claimed she wasn't there. The parents went outside and searched the entire yard, but they couldn't find Jessica. Frustrated, they decided to check with neighbors, hoping someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor mentioned seeing Jessica in the yard earlier. She was sitting on a bench and reading a book, but that didn't help the worried parents find her. As darkness fell and their daughter remained missing, they decided to call the police. Officers arrived in a few minutes, initiated a search, and started interviewing neighbors. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find Jessica, so the police expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, an unexpected call came into the police station. The caller provided sparse details, but the police raced to the pumping station, finding Jessica's body hidden nearby in a trash bag, mere yards from the road, but obscured by the bridge's location. Personal effects by the corpse suggested the tragic circumstances. Meanwhile, the investigators focused on tracing the 911 call. It was evident that the call came from the murderer, and the police hoped it could help identify them. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public payphone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the officers arrived, the perpetrator had already vanished. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was a challenge. It was a public payphone, so there might be multiple prints. Moreover, investigators realized that the criminal had likely wiped the phone after the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere, and her body was transported to the water pumping station. Traces on the ground in front of the facility indicated that the killer likely pulled the body from a vehicle in a trash bag and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothing was intact, except for one shoe. Police couldn't find it in the bag or in the surrounding area. The only lead found at the crime scene was the tire track on the ground. Police couldn't be certain it belonged to the killer's vehicle, but they photographed it and made a cast. Medical experts examined the body and determined that the victim died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It seemed the killer had used their bare hands. A partially digested hamburger was found in her stomach, which she had consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother stated that she had not provided Jessica with any such food that day, leading the police to believe that the meal was provided by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the motive of the perpetrator entirely unclear. Initially, the police began to consider Jessica's parents as suspects, as neither of them had a solid alibi. At the time of Jessica's disappearance, her mother claimed she was packing in the apartment, and the father was shopping. Theoretically, they both had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police tried to understand how the killer managed to take Jessica from her complex's yard without anyone noticing or Jessica screaming. This led them to believe that the perpetrator likely knew the victim well, and she left with him willingly. Another supporting factor was the tone of the killer's voice during the 911 call. Despite the experts' efforts to clean up the recording, they noticed sorrow and regret in the killer's voice, as if they genuinely regretted committing the murder. The fact that the killer took the risk of calling 911 spoke volumes. The perpetrator could have done it either for the thrill of playing with the police and manipulating the investigation, or they genuinely regretted their actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. Considering the caller's evident sadness, investigators leaned towards the second option. Police inspected Jessica's father's car, finding something intriguing in the trunk. There was a roll of black trash bags similar to the one containing the victim's body. However, an expert examining the bag from the crime scene quickly determined it differed from those found in the father's car, clearly belonging to a different roll. So the man was temporarily ruled out as a suspect, and investigators shifted their focus to others. Forensic experts carefully examined the victim's clothing and body for potential clues, uncovering a few leads. They discovered a substantial amount of dog hair, despite the fact that Jessica's family did not own a dog, suggesting the animal belonged to the killer. Additionally, they found human hair on her body belonging to an unknown white male. However, the experts required a few days to extract the DNA profile. Two types of foreign fibers were also discovered on Jessica's clothes. Through analysis of their structure, the experts concluded that one likely came from a car seat cover and the other from a carpet, further supporting the theory that the victim was killed elsewhere and transported to the water pumping station by car. Regarding the dog hair found on Jessica's clothing, experts attempted to determine the breed using the FBI's database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from various dog breeds. This database has been helpful in criminal cases where dog hair could be crucial evidence. Experts compared the hair sample with the database, ruling out one breed after another. Ultimately, they concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes belonged to a Shar-Pei. It appears the killer owned a Shar-Pei, and the hair ended up on Jessica's clothes, either in the perpetrator's vehicle or at their residence. According to the preliminary theory of investigators, the killer somehow might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, and then brought her to his home and murdered her. Meanwhile, the experts attempted to enhance the phone call recording, but it proved to be a challenging task. They decided to try a different approach and sought assistance from NASA. NASA had advanced tools for clearing audio recordings, originally designed to enhance recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality audio track. However, the experts still needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare it with the call recording and establish a match. Based on the detective's assumption that the killer might have known Jessica, they decided to play the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize it. She listened to it for the first time and said that the voice sounded familiar, but the mother couldn't remember whose voice it is. However, during a second attempt, it clicked. She recognized the voice as their neighbor who lived in the same complex, although she couldn't remember his name. She told the detectives that the man often walked his Shar-Pei in the yard. Police swiftly identified the man as 35-year-old James Crow. During the initial hours of Jessica's disappearance, investigators had already questioned him along with other neighbors. He mentioned that he saw her in the yard while walking his dog, and they spoke briefly before he left. Detectives dug into his background and found that Crow had no criminal history. He lived with his wife, who was a nurse. The man was a former truck driver, currently unemployed, and he spent most of his time strolling the streets with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that merely the similarity in voice and owning a dog of a specific breed wasn't enough for an arrest, so they obtained a search warrant for his car. They discovered two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, there was an empty Happy Meal bag, even though Jessica had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach and James didn't have children. This seemed highly suspicious. Experts also noticed that the car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. Police found out that Crow replaced them on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not particularly old and could have lasted for several more years. Crow claimed to have left the old tires at a car service, which was quite unusual considering they were not old at all. So the police headed to this service building, but by the time they arrived, there was only one tire from James's car left. They compared its tread pattern from what was found near the body, but detectives faced an unexpected twist. They didn't match. However, they initially weren't 100% sure that the tire mark on the ground was left by the killer's car and not some other vehicle, as maintenance staff regularly visited the building, and this tire mark could have belonged to their vehicle. The police also searched James's apartment, where they found a new lead, a box containing several rolls of trash bags matching the size and color of the one found on the victim's body. Obviously, this couldn't be considered strong evidence, so detectives had to figure out if there was a way to establish that the bags had come from the same roll. At first glance, this task seemed impossible. The bags themselves had no markings or distinctive features, and there were hundreds of manufacturers of such products. But even the detectives were soon surprised by the creativity they could display in such a complex challenge. They contacted N.L. Roberts, the man responsible for quality control at the company that produced the bags found in the suspect's apartment. At first, he identified the specific factory where the bags were produced, as there was a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls, indicating that the product was made at a facility in Virginia. The expert then explained that a tiny amount of iron or titanium is included in the composition of the bags, depending on their color. Considering that the factory produces bags of various colors, the materials in the production are constantly changing, and the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium literally changes daily, since such tiny amounts cannot be measured with 100% accuracy, and there's no need to do that. In other words, experts could take bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, measure the presence of the elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays, and get a very precise ratio. Through this analysis, they found that the ratio of iron and titanium to plastic in both bags was absolutely identical, indicating that they were manufactured on the same day and should belong to the same batch. But that's not all. During the production of trash bags, a small amount of microscopic debris ends up on the machines, which is acceptable within production standards. However, this results in small streaks visible to the naked eye when the plastic sheets later cut into bags are rolled out. These streaks are present on every bag in large amounts, forming a unique pattern for each roll of fabric. The debris particles on the conveyor belt are constantly moving, falling off and being replaced by new ones, so the pattern of similar streaks is preserved for a maximum of a few hundred feet of fabric. This means that it can be understood from this pattern that two different bags were not just made within the same batch, but within a few hours of each other. Experts compared the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, and the lines on them matched with astonishing precision. But that's not all. The experts also explained that after the bags are manufactured, they are rolled into a bundle using a machine, which often does this somewhat unevenly. However, if you don't look closely, these deviations are almost imperceptible and the rolls appear smooth. Examining the edges of the bags, however, reveals tiny folds and creases, forming a similarly unique pattern as with the streaks. In the end, the experts compared the bags again and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched the one from the crime scene. They concluded that the bag used by the killer was not just produced by the same company, but was manufactured within a range of almost 17 boxes apart. This meant that with a high degree of probability, the perpetrator took the bag from one of the rolls in James's apartment. Forensic analysts also compared the two types of fibers found on Jessica's clothing with the carpet in the suspect's apartment and the covers of his car seats. Both samples matched. Finally, a sound expert compared the 911 call recording with a voice sample from James and concluded that the voice belonged to the same person. Despite the incredible work done by the experts, detectives faced one major problem. All this fell into the realm of circumstantial evidence, but they were confident in James's involvement and decided to arrest him. The man was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intent to seek the death penalty. Considering that James continued to deny his guilt, the case proceeded to trial. The prosecution presented their version of how the crime happened. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. According to the police version, on that day, James noticed Jessica alone on a bench while walking his dog and started a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After the restaurant, he presumably took her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his place. Perhaps he offered her to play with Pumpkin, his dog. His wife was at work, and the presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes indicated that she was there on the day of her death. According to investigators, James might have attempted to assault Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the forensic report, the perpetrator not only strangled the victim with his bare hands, but also pressed his palm against her face, perhaps because Jessica tried to scream, and he panicked and attacked her. After Jessica passed away, he placed her in a garbage bag to transport the body to his car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. He drove a few miles and left the body near a water station, made the 911 call from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's lawyers attempted to challenge all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid proof of their client's guilt. Despite the fact that the judge accepted the evidence, the defense was right. In cases involving the death penalty, the standards for evidence are much higher, and in James' case, there was a significant chance of avoiding this sentence. In light of these circumstances, a plea deal was proposed to the suspect. Under the terms of the deal, he would admit guilt to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without parole, thus avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. He wasn't required to disclose any details of the crime, but he mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family and save them from going through the trial. The prosecution believed that the perpetrator genuinely showed remorse, citing his 911 call, the purpose of which remained unclear. The only logical explanation in this context was that James sincerely wanted to alleviate his guilt for such a heinous crime. Jessica's parents were not pleased with the deal, as they had hoped for the death penalty, and they also wanted the killer to confess. But James remained silent. Nevertheless, he didn't live to see the end of his term. James passed away in November 2011 at the age of 49 due to health problems, taking the details of his actions and motives with him to the grave. Jessica's case involved truly unique work by experts and detectives. The amount of information they gathered by examining ordinary garbage bags astonished even the judge, who had never encountered such evidence throughout his career. On the morning of February 19, 2020, As the first light began to brighten the street and silence settled throughout the city, a man was thoughtfully cleaning his car. Suddenly, loud screams pierced the quiet. His heart raced as he turned to see a nearby car coming to an abrupt stop. In the front seat sat a visibly pale and frightened woman, screaming hysterically, while the man beside her remained calm and composed. The man approached the car. Tension filled the air, ready to explode. Then, a deafening bang echoed through the morning, followed by a flash of light, like lightning tearing through silence. Thick smoke and fire obscured the sky. After what felt like an eternity, he came to his senses amid chaos. He saw a woman engulfed in flames, screaming in agony. Panicking, he grabbed a hose in a desperate attempt to douse the fire, but it continued to spread relentlessly. What was meant to be an ordinary day transformed into a nightmare where flames and fear dominated. What led them to this horrific scenario? When did normality morph into such tragedy? Hannah Clark was a vivacious 31-year-old woman who brought energy to everyone around her. Yet her fate took a dark turn, resulting in irreversible loss that shattered her life. She courageously faced off against a man whose name was once engraved in her heart, but paid an immense price for this confrontation. This tragic event occurred in Camp Hill, located in eastern Brisbane, Australia, a serene town where once vibrant life vanished abruptly, leaving behind only memories of its past vibrancy. Hannah Clark entered the world on September 8, 1988. By 2020, she was a devoted mother to 3 children, 2 delightful girls and 1 spirited boy. However, her family faced challenging times. When Aaliyah, 6 years old, Liana, 4, and Trey was just 3, Hannah left an indelible impression of her warmth and cheerful disposition in the hearts of those who loved her. Her entire family remembers her as an exceptionally gentle and kind spirit with a radiant smile that could brighten any room. She dedicated herself entirely to her children, giving them everything they needed. Together with her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, a rugby player from the New Zealand Warriors, they raised their children. Despite a significant age gap between them, their relationship quickly grew deep and strong. Yet Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, never fully trusted Rowan. Hannah chose to ignore her mother's reservations about him. People around Rowan often spoke poorly of him. He had trouble remembering even his 4-digit bank card PIN and neglected to register his car after purchasing it, claiming no one had informed him about the necessity of such formalities. Hannah's parents were burdened with despair. Confronted with this difficult situation, they realized that interfering in Hannah's relationship with Rowan might lead to them losing their bond with her altogether. Their hearts were heavy, but they decided not to fight against it to preserve their cherished connection, the love and trust of their daughter. Sue had concerns about Rowan from the beginning. She sensed something amiss about him. He appeared arrogant and self-centered. The considerable age difference troubled her as well. When they met, Hannah had just graduated, while Rowan was already an adult at 31 years old. The fact that he hadn't finalized his divorce when they first began dating added to their worries. When presented with this situation upon meeting Rowan for the first time, Hannah's parents inquired about his ex-wife's circumstances. Rowan explained he still lived with her due to obligations towards his son. Eventually, though, Rowan finalized his divorce and continued pursuing a relationship with Hannah despite initial concerns from those closest to her. In 2011, he proposed to her, and Hannah yes. A year later, they married in Kingsley, New South Wales, Australia. They had 3 children together. The eldest daughter, Aaliyah, was quick-witted and inherited the best qualities from her mother, according to her grandmother's stories. Liana, the middle daughter, was a charming child who aspired to be the center of attention and always pleased those around her. The youngest child was Trey, perhaps the most beloved. Hannah adored him. He also showed athletic talent, which brought great joy to his parents who were involved in sports. Rowan was a former professional athlete who loved working out at the gym. He had impressive muscles, though their origin was not related to hard work, but to steroids use. This led to a mental disorder for him. Like Hannah, Rowan worked as a personal trainer, though their methods differed greatly. Clients loved Hannah for her kindness and caring nature. Because of this, she had many regular customers. Rowan's approach as a trainer was fundamentally different. His inappropriate and aggressive behavior, caused by steroids, made him unsuitable as a trainer. For example, he would call clients fat and clumsy on social media and often insult women during training sessions. Rowan faced difficulties in communicating with people, which affected his career and financial situation significantly. Hannah had to take on the role of breadwinner in the family. This only irritated Rowan even more because he felt humiliated that his wife was doing a better job than he was. Despite financial difficulties, they decided to open their own fitness club together. In between training sessions, they both worked part-time at a sports store, a decision made by Rowan so he could control Hannah's every move and know her whereabouts always. Their story is marked by contrast. While one shone through kindness and empathy, the other struggled with aggression and challenges in communication. However, his conduct in the store mirrored his behavior in the gyms where he previously worked. It seemed that Baxter consistently sought to display his superiority over women. During a personal training session with Sue, Hannah's mother, Rowan revealed a more malicious side. Instead of demonstrating the expected respect for the club owner and his mother-in-law, he acted inappropriately. During the session, Rowan deliberately caused Sue to fall. She struck her head on the floor and began to bleed. In such circumstances, any reasonable person would have apologized and promptly assisted her. But Rowan was different. He not only showed no empathy, but also laughed cynically at Sue and made sarcastic remarks about her clumsiness throughout the remainder of the training. Despite this incident and their own reservations, Hannah's parents endeavored to accept Rowan for their daughter's sake. Personal training sessions with Baxter became torturous for clients. Insults like fat and lazy were frequently directed at them. At home, his tyranny extended to Hannah and their children. Over time, his insults grew more cutting. He punished Hannah for any misbehavior, anything that displeased him. He forbade the children from seeing Sue, their grandmother, and prohibited Hannah from communicating with her brother. Hannah found herself isolated and severed from family and friends. Rowan exercised absolute control over her life, including taking away her clients and dictating who she could see and when. Gradually, she became akin to a prisoner within her own home. Each day, Rowan demanded intimacy from Hannah. Any refusal provoked his anger, which he then directed at her and the children. After coercing her into compliance, he would smile insincerely and offer a false apology, attributing it to an outburst of passion. In isolation and under constant control and cruelty, Hannah's spirit began to diminish. Rowan's tyranny was affecting both her life and those of her children adversely. The marriage that once thrived on love had devolved into a living nightmare for them all. Hannah lived under immense fear, imprisoned by unseen but potent bonds. Rowan, a tyrant and a brute, sought her obedience through threats and violence. His words pierced her heart like venomous thorns. "If you don't obey, I will hurt you." The specter of his wrath haunted the house, tainting each day. Hannah's environment was a cage of prohibitions put up by her husband. Wearing short shorts or bright colors, symbols of freedom and self-expression, was strictly forbidden to her. Rowan could not bear for his wife, whom he considered his property, to attract attention. He believed her place was in the shadows, away from prying eyes. Hannah did not dare to defy him. Any attempt at self-expression aroused his fury and rage. The insults and bullying extended beyond just Hannah. Rowan often directed undue harshness towards the children. While playful games among parents and children are common, Rowan frequently crossed all boundaries, inflicting intentional harm on them. When they cried out in pain, he mocked them, showing no regard for their feelings. Once, a playful fight with Aaliyah escalated into tragedy. Rowan miscalculated his strength and deliberately pushed the girl. She hit her head severely. The injury was deep enough to require hospitalization and stitches. Instead of consoling his daughter and apologizing for his aggression, Rowan blamed Aaliyah. This wasn't the only form of torment he inflicted on his children. As an athlete accustomed to ice baths post-training, a standard regimen for adults, Rowan forced even little Trey to endure the icy water despite their pleas and tears. He even posted photos and videos of them on social media with captions like, "Even my kids take ice baths." Remarkably perceptive despite their youth, the children understood their predicament well. Aaliyah, the eldest daughter known for her quick wit and resilience, often argued with Rowan and tried to resist his tyranny. Whenever she overheard her parents arguing, she intervened in an effort to shield her mother from Rowan's ire. Feeling suffocated by Rowan's oppressive control, like a stranglehold on her soul, Hannah recognized that the toxic atmosphere was harming not just herself, but also the children profoundly. She decided to take a critical step, confronting her husband head-on despite knowing his cruel tendencies well. She understood that he might use the children against her in his ruthless mannerisms. Hannah did not believe he was capable of physically harming them. However, the fear of being denied the chance to see them tormented her greatly. She was a dedicated mother, willing to do anything for her children, yet she felt trapped. A single misstep could result in losing the most precious thing, the bond with her beloved children. In that same year, Hannah experienced a life-altering event. Rowan developed an interest in jiu-jitsu. One day, after returning from training fueled by adrenaline, he unexpectedly attacked Hannah. His hands tightened around her throat, and chilling words escaped his mouth. Overwhelmed by fear, Hannah did not immediately recognize herself as a victim of domestic violence. This assault was far more terrifying than anything she had previously endured. In the aftermath, Hannah resolved to leave Rowan Baxter at the earliest opportunity. When she contacted the police, she detailed the horrors she had endured. The responding officer informed her that coerced intimacy without consent constitutes domestic violence. This conversation was pivotal for Hannah. It opened her eyes and motivated her to take immediate action. She took her children and sought refuge at her parents' home, determined to escape the nightmare that shadowed them. By early November 2019, their relationship had not yet legally concluded in divorce. During this period, Hannah decided to allow Rowan some time with their children, despite having little control over the situation without court intervention. Nonetheless, she understood that trusting Rowan with the children was precarious at best. Rowan struggled with his emotions and perhaps sought solace by consulting Pastor Christopher Ans from his church. Christopher, known for his kindness and willingness to listen, provided Rowan with support and counsel during this challenging time. Over time, Christopher began to observe unsettling characteristics in Rowan. He noticed Rowan's desire for dominance and control. In moments of vulnerability, Rowan confided in Christopher, admitting his awareness of the illegality of his actions and his need for assistance. However, he had no idea how to remedy the situation. This confession marked the initial step towards reformation. Christopher's support and wise advice could have been beneficial on this challenging path, but it did not transpire. One day, Hannah and her children were walking quietly down the street when, without warning, a terrible event occurred. Rowan suddenly appeared, seized Liana, their middle daughter, and disappeared. Hannah's world fell apart. Intense anxiety and fear for her daughter's safety overwhelmed her. For 2 days, she was unable to locate Liana and had no knowledge of her whereabouts. The growing anxiety became unbearable torture. Eventually, Hannah sought assistance from the police. The officers conducted a thorough search and fortunately located Liana with her father. The girl was found alive and unharmed, although the experience left an indelible mark on her psyche. Recognizing the imminent danger to Hannah and her children, the police strongly recommended she file a formal report against him and obtain a protection order. However, Hannah, paralyzed by grief and fear, was not able to take this crucial step. Despite the numerous issues caused by Rowan, he was unfortunately still awarded joint custody of the children. This legal leverage enabled him to persist in his abuse of Hannah. Following another visitation with their father, the children were returned to Hannah's parents. Before departing, Rowan attempted to humiliate Hannah by displaying photographs of her in her underwear near his car, where their children could see them. Overcome with anger, Hannah tried to retrieve these photos, but Rowan responded violently. He grabbed her shoulder, twisted her arm, and struck her in the face, resulting in a split lip. It remains unknown how severe this assault might have become if Sue, Hannah's mother, had not intervened promptly to assist her daughter. In response to intervention and shouting insults, Baxter drove away hastily. Hannah, gripped by shock and despair, went to the police because this attack clearly violated her protection order. Sadly, the authorities didn't act swiftly, which resulted in a heartbreaking tragedy. The day started out as usual and seemed like it would just be another working day. But there was an underlying sense of destiny. On February 19, 2020, clutching her car keys with hopes of a peaceful morning, Hannah left her parents' house to take her 3 children to school and kindergarten. Yet fate had other intentions. Minute by minute, moment by moment, disaster loomed over Hannah and her children's lives. Like a magnet drawing them inescapably into darkness, they were pulled towards it. When Hannah got into the car with her children, Baxter unexpectedly climbed in as well. Fear gripped Hannah for herself and her children. She pleaded with Rowan to leave them alone, but his unchecked rage filled the air with threats and demands for Hannah to start driving. Not wanting to escalate the situation, she obeyed. As Hannah turned onto Raven Street, she noticed a man cleaning his car nearby. In what seemed an ordinary moment, fate took a sudden turn towards catastrophe. Desperate for vengeance, Rowan grabbed a canister of gasoline from under the seat and doused Hannah and her children with it. Michael Zach was an accidental witness to this scene. He later recounted hearing the sound of a car pulling up to his house that morning. Panicked, Hannah screamed for help at him. She begged that Rowan wanted to kill her and had covered them all in gasoline. Rowan, holding tightly to Hannah, didn't let her go for a moment. His desperate cries for help got lost in a storm of silent madness. Michael approached the car from the passenger side and encountered a harrowing sight. Rowan's blank expression and the lighter he held. In an instant, flames engulfed the vehicle, a burst so intense it chilled the blood. Screams echoed, ears ringing, and then there was silence. The explosion left Michael stunned, disoriented, and pulled him out of reality itself. When he regained awareness, he was initially unsure of his surroundings or what had transpired. All around him lay chaos. The acrid smell of burnt metal and gasoline filled the air. Flames ravaged the car, reducing it to charred remains. Amazingly, Hannah managed to escape the blaze, scorched and bloody but alive. She screamed frantically, "My children! Where are my children?" Pleas for help poured out, not for herself, but for her children, still in danger within the burning inferno. As if answering her desperate cries, a passing car stopped. A doctor, off duty but compelled by conscience, rushed towards her. Upon reaching Hannah, he heard her anguished cry, "My children, they're there. Why didn't I stay with them?" That single phrase captured all her world's pain and despair. She was torn apart by regret and self-recrimination for surviving when her children did not. With professional composure and urgency, the doctor endeavored to assist amid the turmoil surrounding them both. Michael didn't hesitate for a second. Grabbing the hose at his house, he began pouring water over the burning car. The fire was ruthless, though. It consumed the entire vehicle with no hope of saving the children. Both the doctor and Michael started shouting for Hannah to duck and hide to put out the fire, but in her grief, she didn't hear them. "My children! Where are my children?" she cried out, her words filled with desperation and madness. In those first terrible moments after the explosion, Michael didn't notice the children inside. It was hard for him to believe Hannah would put them in such danger. Only later, when her screams finally made sense to him, did his heart fill with chilling horror. He raced toward the car to rescue them, but the flames were too fierce, the heat unbearable. All efforts were futile. Hannah lay on the road, her body scorched by fire, repeatedly saying, "My children, someone save my children." No one yet grasped the tragedy's full scale. Burns covered more than 97% of her body. Only her feet remained untouched, the only unaffected place on her severely burned body. Despite unimaginable pain, Hannah couldn't stop thinking about her unprotected children. Indeed, Those who had always said Hannah was selfless were proven right. The police looked at her burned body and knew survival chances were slim. Yet, Hannah did not accept that fate easily. A courageous fire in her heart allowed her to summon every last bit of strength to give a testimony to police officers, a final gesture before facing an awful death. Officer Angus Kay wrote down every word she managed to say. Through pain and despair, she tried describing events that led up to her tragedy. Hannah, struggling to move her lips, identified her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, as the individual responsible and relayed all the details. Her voice grew softer by the minute, and her frail body weakened further. Officer Key stayed by her side throughout. He commended her for her bravery and reassured her that she had already contributed significantly and everything would be all right. His actions would later receive high praise from the authorities. His professionalism was crucial in gathering materials that became key to a verdict. Even in her final moments, Hannah didn't fully grasp the horror unfolding around her. When questioned about previous threats from Rowan, she denied any such instances. Doctors came to alleviate her pain, but she could no longer speak. Amidst all this chaos, Rowan Baxter behaved oddly. Despite burns covering 80% of his body, he exited the car on his own. While Hannah pleaded for her children's safety, he sat on the road, staring at the burning vehicle. After some time, Rowan, seemingly possessed, climbed back into the car engulfed in flames. One of the bystanders, risking his own life, attempted to extinguish the fire at the rear of the vehicle. At that moment, Rowan retrieved a knife from inside the car and drove people away from it, preventing them from extinguishing the blaze. The children, trapped in a dire situation of steel and flames, had virtually no chance of survival. Nonetheless, onlookers did not cease their efforts to rescue them. Rowan's actions kept everyone at bay, effectively sentencing his children to a painful demise. What drove him? Was it a desperate attempt to shield them from an inevitable fate or an act of madness clouded by selfishness? One witness made an effort to reason with Rowan, pleading for him to drop the knife and allow a chance for the children's rescue. However, Rowan was unresponsive. As the children perished and Hannah succumbed before his eyes, Baxter turned the knife on himself. His selfish act eradicated any remaining hope for everyone involved. The children died. Hannah followed shortly thereafter, and Rowan's motives remained shrouded in mystery. At this tragic scene, a senior doctor noted Hannah's valor. Observing her wounds, which were clearly fatal, he saw only her concern for the children's welfare and a desire to convey the truth in her eyes. Hannah Clark passed away at the hospital on the very same day of her admission. Only 31 years old, she was a tragic of severe domestic violence, along with her children. Despite facing immense danger, Hannah tirelessly fought to protect her family from an abusive individual. Her courageous efforts, although ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated her steadfast resolve. Each day, she exhibited remarkable bravery, putting her loved one's safety above all else. Through her relentless effort to confront her harrowing circumstances, she ensured that her story would endure. On March 9, 2020, Hannah was laid to rest alongside her children. This event deeply affected the Clark family. In their grief, they decided to establish the Small Steps for Hannah Foundation with the mission of ending domestic violence in Australia. Just 4 days after this heart-wrenching event, thousands gathered to bid farewell to Hannah and her children. Hannah's memory will live on in Camp Hill through Hannah's house, where new trees were planted and a plaque installed recounting her life story. Through these initiatives and remembrances, Hannah's legacy persists for future generations to honor and remember. In December 2020, Hannah Clark was recognized as the Woman of the Year by Marie Claire. This honor celebrated her courage in battling domestic violence. Yet her story continues beyond this recognition. Although Baxter is no longer alive, police have not closed the case. Their aim now is to delve into his motives to prevent similar tragic events from happening again. Those who knew Rowan describe him as egocentric and violent. Nicole, a friend of Hannah's, expressed her strong frustration. She spoke to the police, criticizing their inaction and negligence. Why wasn't help given to Hannah? Why were the children not saved? These questions remain unanswered for now, but one thing is evident. Rowan Baxter's selfishness led to a devastating tragedy. It left behind only grief and unresolved questions that will haunt many. Hannah's mother shared harrowing details of what her daughter suffered due to Baxter's influence. She recalled an incident at the gym where Rowan intentionally dropped Hannah on the floor, highlighting his aggressive nature further. A pastor who conversed with Baxter also noted his controlling tendencies and lack of empathy toward others. Pain. On January 26, 2020, investigators discovered a note left by Baxter just before the tragic incident. In this note, Baxter expressed that he considered himself a victim. He wrote, "I can't take this anymore. She must understand how hard it is to not have to see my own children. My life is ruined." Notably, Baxter signed the note on his own behalf and seemingly on behalf of the children. This detail underscores his perception of himself as a victim and his accusation against Hannah for ruining his life. The content of this note made Baxter's intentions evident. It appears he may have had plans to kidnap the children and retaliate against Hannah. During the court hearing, it was revealed that a week before the tragedy, on February 13, 2020, Hannah had alerted her friends about potential danger from Baxter. Her friend, Nicole Brooks, contacted the police on her behalf to warn them that Hannah and her children were at risk. Regrettably, the police did not take these concerns seriously, stating there was no specific threat they could act upon. Despite Nicole's persistent efforts, her warnings went unheeded. This situation exemplifies how inadequate laws to protect women from domestic violence can result in tragedy. Had stricter regulations been in place, perhaps the authorities could have responded more swiftly and effectively, potentially preventing the loss of Hannah and her children's lives.